Board, are we ready to begin? Okay. Welcome to tonight, to May 22nd's Board of Education regular board meeting. The Board of Education maintains a web page on www.lewispalmer.org through which members of the public can find live streaming information and meeting records, including presentations and resources, which may be reviewed and discussed during this meeting. Ms. Wood, would you call roll?
Mr. Norris?
Present.
Ms. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Here.
Ms. Upchurch?
Here.
And I believe Mr. Clausen will be calling in at 6:30 this evening.
Correct. May I get our Bearbotics robotics team to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you guys. At this time, we have the approval of our agenda. Any questions, comments, thoughts? I would like to make a motion to adjust our agenda to include item C1. After talking with legal counsel at our last meeting in April, an action item was done that we need to reverse, so I'd like to add an action item to the agenda, which would read, specifically, it would read, let me get to see. Consider approve reversal of the board office of vice president and appoint secretary.
I'll second that motion.
Any thoughts, questions, comments? We'll dive into this later as well. Ms. Wood?
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
Aye. Our next item is recognition and comments. We'd like to recognize our student Bearbotics team. Our head coaches are Mike Hinkle and Jeanette Breton, and members of our Bearbotics FRC and FTC teams will be here to highlight their team's success this year during their competition season. So I'd like to welcome our Bearbotics team right now. Welcome to our board meeting, and welcome to you all, and congratulations to you all on a successful season. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dane Vandenhoek. I am the FRC representative for Bearbotics. I am going to be a senior this year. I've been on the team since freshman, and my role on the team is CTO, which stands for Chief Technical Officer, so I am a co-captain.
Hello, my name is Emma Beery. I am going to be a senior this year. I've been on the team since I was a freshman. I am on FRC, and I am the robot design lead.
Hi, I'm Reese Gearhart. I'm going to be a junior this fall, and I'm the representative for FTC. I'm one of the team captains, and I've been an FTC for 2 years.
So FIRST was an organization started by Dean Kamen, and it's an international program, so it's there are teams all across the world. And he created the program to teach life skills to young students, particularly in the STEM world. So most of this information that I say across all these teams is generalized. And there are 3 different divisions: FRC, which stands for First Robotics Competition; FTC, which stands for First Technical Challenge; and First FLL, which stands for First LEGO League. So the FRC season starts in January, and the World's competition is in the middle of April. Within that season, we have 8 weeks to build that larger robot you see over there. That costs about $12,000 and about 2,700 man-hours of all the students you see here to design CAD, so on computer-aided design, prototype, build, and program, and practice with before our first regional, which we had in March. The FTC is pretty similar.
Yeah, ours is pretty similar. Just the only difference being we have a smaller robot, so it's able to be a bit more fluid and change a lot more in a season, and just develop as we have more ideas about what to do with it. This robot actually went through a lot of changes on its own, and was able to do really well in regionals and in state competitions.
The youngest program in the first organization is FLL, First Lego League, which is that tiny robot right there. So at this level, we have two sixth grade teams right now. We're looking to expand further into the middle school level. But these are mainly Lego based, so the students have a wide range of creativity in those aspects of the robot building. And to go off of that, for the award side of things, they have an innovation award. So this year they learned all about how to create energy through the water systems and solar panels and whatnot. So our two FLL teams made it to state this year. Their rookie year, which is an amazing performance, and they did a really good job.
FTC this year placed for the Innovation, Design, and Programming Awards. For the Innovation and Design Awards, they placed for their creativity, and the programming for their autonomous pre-programmed sections. And they also are, all three of our teams placed in regionals and were able to go to state, where they also competed in one alliance.
One thing about FTC is it is only their second year, so placing that well and already going to state and winning, or not winning, but being a finalist is an incredible achievement. On the FRC side, we achieved our best this year. That robot was able to win us our excellence in engineering, industrial design, and get us to be a finalist against some of the best teams in the world, such as 1619, which is from Longmont, Colorado. And they were able to win the whole international program at Worlds last year, and we were able to beat them 2 times. So that's one of our favorite achievements this year, was beating them, because they've always won Denver, and we happened to beat them out this year. So yeah. Across FTC, FLL, and FRC, we've all won the Gracious Professionalism Award as well, which is being respectful and friendly even in the face of competitions, which is very unlike most sports, where you're actually encouraged to help your fellow teammates and people you're competing against, even if you're playing a next match against them. We helped many teams during our competitions with programming and building and parts and all that kind of stuff.
In addition to robot design, we really like to focus on community outreach. So we have around 1,200 volunteer hours this year at local robotics competitions, as well as other things like our own hosted scrimmage that Reese will talk about.
So yeah, each November, around the time of Thanksgiving, we have our own Gobble Squabble. We started this tradition once we started having FTC teams, where we invited teams from all over Colorado Springs to compete and show off what they had so far in their season. As part of that, we open up our doors to just the community, and we have these internships as well. Some summer internships are running right now even. We teach how to do engineering and other STEM activities that involve a lot of creativity.
One very special thing about this program is the large majority of our alumni have gone to pursue engineering in their own fields. And 90% of the graduates in the past 3 years are now STEM majors. We just recently had 2 Barobotics alumni that graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy, which is a great achievement, and they definitely influence a large majority of the program here. And one of our main focuses for this program is to be sustainable. So we teach the youth all the way from seniors to elementary students, and we have 4 FLL teams that we are starting across MA High School or MA Middle School and Lewis Palmer Middle School in order to improve the sustainability as well. The opportunities that we have through our space is incredible. We are so lucky to have the space that we have in order to build such amazing robots and be able to compete at the level we do. I can speak for the rest of the team and say that we really love what we do and we really appreciate the opportunities the district has given us to do so. Thank you.
Board, any comments or questions? How many of you are graduating?
We actually only have 2 alumni this year, David Ewan and Ben Ladow, which is one of our lightest years we've ever had for graduates.
I had just one question. How long has this program been running now?
12 years?
12
Yeah,
years.
12 years.
And my only other request is that perhaps we could get an invitation to the Gobble Squabble.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, what is your award over there?
There's 4 awards, yeah.
Those, can you hold one of those up? Those are pretty impressive.
Those are FRC, this is FTC.
Yeah, those are FRC awards we've won this past year for what we do for the community. First awards, those with impact awards and engineering inspiration for those teams who have helped their teams and their community, and they recognize that every year we have an impact award, which is just a good example or a good way for us to show how we've been an example for community outreach across our community and how we've impacted our community.
Well, congratulations on a job well done to all of you students and your mentors too. Your mentors put in a lot of time, and your coaches. If anyone wants more information or wants to contribute to, and what is the best way for them to get in contact and in touch with the team?
They can reach us at our website, or they can reach us with our main coach, Mr. Mike Hinkle over there.
Okay.
You can. Yes. Barobotics.org.
Real hard to remember.
Yep.
I had one more quick question. On the sustainability requirement or objective, can you or somebody on the team explain how you modeled that into the design, the assembly, and then obviously the ongoing maintenance and adjustments that you make?
Yeah, so each year we have we're allowed to create more capable and more complex robots. That's the most complex robot we've ever made, and that's because of the sustainability we've made. We originally started 2 years ago with just being an FRC team, but then we decided to break down and branch down into FTC and FLL and create programs across all the school to create this pipeline in order to not only feed the Barobotics program and create a more capable robot every year, but also to increase the STEM knowledge across the middle school, elementary, and high school levels, respectively.
Thank you.
Yep.
So seeing how far this program has come from the years with limited resources and limited funding and space back to when some of us in this room had students that were a part of the beginnings and the transition teams and have also gone on and been successful because of the robotics teams to today's recognized championship team. Your guys' story is inspiring, and it's a testament that what can be accomplished with determination and dedication and hard work and teamwork and creativity and community and financial support. And I anticipate that there's going to be great things to come from you amazing students and the future of this amazing team. And I hope that the program continues to grow and excel with the help and support of our community. So thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you too.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
At this time, we will move on to item B2, which is public comments. Okay. And I wanted to start out before I read our policy that everyone has a right to redress and communicate with their respective elected individuals, and to that end, so that all our families and students and staff and community members have an opportunity to speak equally and to ensure consistency going forward. There will be a tone at the end of the 3 minutes, at which point the speaker, if the speaker's gone past that, I'll give you a quick reminder to wrap it up with 1 or 2 sentences. And as always, there will be a timer behind me so you can see the timer as well. And I just wanted to make sure we did this as a desire to make sure we hear from all of our community stakeholders, because your voice does matter. So at this time, we have 10 speakers, and in accordance with policy BEDH, the board will hear comments from members of the public who have signed up to speak. And it is our goal as a board to continuously listen and improve, and we invite members of our community to speak publicly for a total of 30 minutes. Speakers will be allotted up to 3 minutes each, and time may be divided equally if more than 10 individuals wish to speak. Groups with a united concern may be asked to appoint a spokesperson. The Board of Education does not expressly or individually respond to public comments, and to this point, comments expressed do not represent the position or opinion of the Board of Education or District 38. Finally, we ask that you keep comments shared appropriate for our PK through 12 audience and respectful at all times. Should you have an issue with a staff member that you would like to address, please consider sharing these criticisms and concerns with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff and involving the board as necessary. We also have 4 public comments that were officially posted through our board comment portal, and they all revolved around the same thing, and that's our busing and transportation on the east side of our school district. So they have been noted, and I would encourage the board and the public to read those 4 public statements as well. So first, we have Jackie Burhans, who is a community member.
Okay. I want to thank the district for the opportunity to review both the academic curriculum and counseling resources. This level of transparency is impressive, and more districts should follow D38's lead. In fact, Monument Academy just needed to create their first curriculum review policy, and they used the districts as a model. So I looked at the counseling resources, which are intended to be used in small groups, occasional classroom lessons, and one-on-one sessions as needed. And I like that one of them aligns with the responsive classroom framework that has already been improved and is used across the district elementary schools. Both the Fly 5 and the Second Step resources are age appropriate and cover much needed areas such as self-regulation, emotion management, empathy, kindness, communication, and problem-solving skills from kindergarten through 5th grade. These are all key skills for all students. As a parent, I appreciate it when what was taught at school supported what I taught my child at home. I also appreciate it when it differed from time to time, as that led to open discussions on our own views and how they might differ. That interchange develops critical thinking. Some might say that social emotional learning should only be taught at home by parents, but a public school has to enroll every child from a wide variety of backgrounds and with a wide variety of parental teaching and involvement. And it's pretty clear from the issues that the community demands the district address around bullying, harassment, mental health, that everybody doesn't come together in a public school with the exact same values and behaviors. In addition to reading, writing, and arithmetic, schools must address these issues through social emotional learning to be effective at the academic side of things and to teach the whole child. These 2 counseling resources do so in a research-based, age-appropriate way. That said, because we don't all have the same opinions, the district's policy, IMBB, allows for parents to exempt their students from any content of a school subject or part of school activity that is contrary to that parent's religious or closely held personal beliefs. What is not okay is when small factions try to censor such subjects or activities for all students, assuming that their closely held beliefs should trump all else. In fact, the district has another policy, KEC, which says in part, the board shall not permit any individual or group to exercise censorship over instructional materials and library collections. Colorado affords parents a lot of freedom of choice to change schools within a district if a particular school is not to their liking, to change to charter schools, private, secular, or religious school, or to homeschool. What we must not do is remove the freedom and local control from public schools to provide a well-rounded education to students from all backgrounds who will go to work with and compete against students from all backgrounds, whether it differs by race, gender orientation, country of origin, etc. Thank you.
Our next speaker is James Howell.
So our robot overlords are gone, I take it. So I want to thank the site team review members for selecting the Colorado story for use in 4th grade social studies classes. This history of Colorado is fascinating reading. I wish I had had more time to spend with it when I was looking at these materials. This book is comprehensive, balanced, and up to date. I was especially impressed by how it handles difficult topics. The book's treatment of the Sand Creek Massacre is an example of how balanced its writing is. It didn't gloss over the nature of the event, but it also didn't dwell on the details, which frankly are pretty horrific. It managed to find a bright spot with a sidebar devoted to Silas Soule, a soldier who told the truth about the massacre and refuted the dishonest report of Colonel Chivington. So you can Google Silas Soule and find out the final chapter in his story. The Colorado story aligns with the standards set by HB 19-1192, which requires more focus on matters relating to American minorities in history and civics. It also aligns with D38 policies such as IMB-R, which addresses how sensitive or controversial issues may be included in curricula. IMB-R says, in part, controversy is inherent in the democratic way of life. It is essential, therefore, that the study and discussion of controversial issues have an important place in education for citizenship in a free society. Students can develop into free citizens with informed loyalty to democracy only through the process of examining evidence, facts, and differing viewpoints, through the exercise of freedom of thought and moral choice, and through the making of responsible decisions. Yeah, let's hear it for IMB-R. This is a policy that supports intellectual freedom and treats educators as the responsible professionals they are. I'm glad the site team review members chose a text that elevates those values. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Gabrielle Lecomte, community member.
My name is Gabrielle Lecomte. We have been residents since 2001, and both of our kids attended D38 traditional public schools from K to 12. They graduated last week with their master's degrees, and I can't tell you how grateful we are for the extraordinary education they received in our schools. It saddens me to see that many of their favorite teachers who were instrumental in that success have left the district meanwhile, some because we can't afford to compensate our educators adequately and competitively. It was heartbreaking to witness repeatedly how this community failed to support our hardworking teachers through multiple MLOs and other measures, despite the fact that they won many prestigious awards in the last 20 years. Well, as long as I was here, they probably won some more. I reviewed the social emotional learning curriculum that is currently under review, and I was very impressed as a business professional as well as a parent. Both Second Step as well as Fly 5, no matter if we are talking about goal setting, growth mindset, emotion management, or problem solving, among other very valuable skills that are mission critical in the 21st century and beyond, I wished we had had the opportunity in previous generations to learn about these things early in life. I'm convinced that we wouldn't have to deal with many of the challenges that we are facing these days. Pretty much every major employer will tell you that often they value high levels of emotional intelligence more than knowledge and experience. Emotional intelligence can be learned and improved with the right guidance and practice. I applaud our district admin and school board members for investing in social emotional learning programs early on. Everyone will benefit from that skill set, not only in our schools, but also in life and our society, locally and globally. Thank you all for everything you do every day, especially our school board members. who are unpaid volunteers. They are spending endless hours every week diligently serving and supporting this amazing community. And a heartfelt thank you also to all our teachers, support staff, and principals who, for many years, despite ongoing and severe funding cuts, continued to give their very best and kept this district high-achieving, loving, and caring for our kids and families. There are many of us who see you and support you 100%. Please do not give up. I truly hope and pray that this is the year when we can finally demonstrate our unwavering support as a majority, also at the ballot box this coming November. Thank you.
And now you know what the tone will sound like. Our next speaker is Christian Zick.
Hi, I'm Kristen Zick. I'm a parent and community member. I live in the District 5, I think, right? East of 83, impacted by the bus driver route. I have 3 boys. I am the single earner and the single parent in my household and work full time. So as you can imagine, this decision about lack of bus service pretty much just blows up my life. So for me, the most important criteria, and what I told my boys, who wants to play football next year as an incoming freshman, that you have to go where the bus takes you. That's the only way our life works. And so they never got to choose PR if they thought that was a better football program. LP is where it's at. That's where your bus goes. That's the only choice for our family. I think in the decision, I put the public comment with some details in there, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot tomorrow that will go into all the different angles you could look at the analysis. But for me, I think there was just a lot of incomplete things, like safety was, would my kids walk 2.5 miles and have to cross Hodgen to get on a bus? I can't get there. Or will I have to leave my job, which I commute an hour to Denver occasionally to get home by 2:45 to meet a bus at a particular time during the workday? Those are just not even options. In the previous board meeting, you guys talked about, I think one of the very first statements was not having bus service is not an option. The current plan is basically not having bus service. One of the things that was never discussed is raise the price. Like, simply, parents need this option to have bus service walkable from their house, and we didn't see that. The incomplete financial analysis didn't take into account the revenue. I think there was like 209 students affected via the PowerPoint. I think the revenue of that, I pay $750 a year for my 3 kids to get to and from school, which is weird because I didn't know people paid for a bus. But so I already pay $750. I would increase that so that I can maintain my job and they can participate in school activities and get to and from safely. That wasn't ever discussed in the presentation as an option, nor was there any parent involvement in the discussion prior to the board meeting where you voted to discontinue bus service or consolidate too far away to be practical for a lot of parents. So I guess my question here, and I don't know if you can answer it, but I hope maybe you can bring an answer tomorrow if you can't answer here, is like, what is the actual factor that would make you reverse this decision or modify this decision to work for parents? Because it seems like it wasn't purely financial. It seems like there's a lot of financial options that were not explored if that was the criteria, and if it's other criteria, then we'd love to know what they were so we can help be a part of the solution. So there's a lot of people feeling inequitable about how this was rolled out. And my last comment is that I don't believe the communication went as far as it needs to.
Mrs. Zork, I thank you so much.
Yeah, one more thing. I'll just wrap up. So
please wrap up with one sentence.
I will. It'll be a long one. No, I don't believe anybody was communicated with unless they're a current year bus rider. And so parents of potential incoming students who are not on the bus this exact year did not receive this and may not even be aware of this conversation. Okay. So I think that's another important factor to make sure you're distributing to the whole population.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Stephen Phillips.
Good evening. I'm a community member. All 4 of our children attended the district, and we feel like they got an incredible education here. And so both my wife and I are very pro-education and very pro our district. And so I want to say thank you for all you've done. Thank you, Dr. Summers, for all you and your team have done. And just appreciate all the hard work. There are increasing complexities, and I know I don't need to tell you this, but increasing complexities in the education world. And that's across our country. The nation's largest school district in Houston was seized in the sense that its entire school board was removed and the state took control of the district. So from the largest districts in the country to the smallest districts in this country, things are getting more complex and more challenging. And I just want to encourage you, as we move ahead, we're probably going to need to think more creatively, more effectively. There are solutions. Pay is obviously a significant issue, right? And so obviously we need our citizenry to back the fact that our teachers, and I will be honest with you, my wife is a school teacher in the district. But I'm not saying this because she is. I'm saying this because we support this district. We support this community. And I just want to encourage you to keep working, keep digging, keep searching, keep trying to communicate as effectively as we possibly can to the community in ways that creates a succinct understanding of what the needs are. I talked to a lot of people. Talked to a lot of people this last session of voting on the mill levy override, and got a lot of feedback from a lot of people. Some people are just simply going to say no because they're going to say no, right? But I think the majority of people that we want to try to influence are those who want good information presented in a very succinct and effective manner so they understand exactly what the need is, why the need exists. And I just would encourage you, let's keep working harder, right? I know you all work very hard, and I appreciate that, and I just want to say thank you.
Leah Phillips. Also a community member.
Good evening. Community member, parent, teacher, everything. Full disclosure, not only do I teach in the district, but I was part of the staff collaboration committee. And I just really felt like it was time for me to say thank you to all of you. Mr. Norris, I don't know you, but thank you for stepping up. Mr. Schwartz, I've had conversations with. Ms. Upchurch, I've seen you at our school many times. Ms. Phillips, I really appreciate everything that you have poured in to our district with no pay, and sometimes I think very little appreciation for the amount of time and effort and heart and abuse that you take. It's been a difficult year. There's been a lot of challenges, and I know that there's been a lot of hard work. Mr. Ridgway, thank you for the time and effort you've put into trying to support teachers, not just monetarily, but just feeling the support that the community has not given us. We're in a difficult place, we all know that, but we're also in an incredible district, and we know that too. So really all I wanted to say tonight was I can't say enough how much I appreciate what you do, because teachers might feel like they don't get enough pay, but you don't get any. And you still show up for all these meetings, and you do all the hard work behind closed doors, and just the effort that you have put into showing us support has been greatly appreciated. I know the work's not finished. There's a lot that needs to be done, but it has to start somewhere, and what's been done has been amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Scott Ludke.
Hello. Thank you all for what you do. I really do appreciate the job you guys do and everything you have to deal with. I too live on the east side of 83, and the decision to cut bus services is going to highly affect my family. We chose to move down here 10 years ago because D38 was a great school district and it provided bus services where we bought our house. I also dropped public comments, so I'm not going to beat every point and repeat that. You guys can all read, so I would ask that you do read that. I feel like some of the presentation that was given to you didn't give you all of the information you needed to make that decision, and I feel like by the parents standing up and trying to present some of those issues that you will reconsider and allow us to work collaboratively with the transportation district to try to come up with a better solution than what was chosen. One of the points that was made was that the furthest southeast neighborhood in the district is High Forest Ranch. That's inaccurate. It's Black Forest Reserve, where I live, and there's also 9 students that take the bus from that district. The new closest bus stop to our house is 8 miles. I know that one of you, and I'm sorry, I don't know who said it, but you said, I want to make sure all of the students in the district are being treated equally at the last meeting after the presentation. And I asked this rhetorical question, is 8 miles being treated equally for my family? And I have 3 children that attend Lewis Palmer. So thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll see some of you tomorrow night.
Steph Maurice. Steph? Yeah, did I read it wrong? Oh, it's Steph Markle.
Okay, let me find my notes. All right, I am a parent of 3 boys, a teacher at Palmer Ridge High School, and a district mentor for the RAD program. I also live east of 83. Although the busing doesn't affect me because of my work schedule, I do hope you guys can find some resolve on this issue for all of my neighbors who've been contacting me. I wanted to take this time to address 2 aspects of the new curriculum that D38 wants to adopt. I'm going to make this brief because I feel like the other speakers before me did a really good job. In regard to the 4th grade Colorado history textbook that was published in 2010 and is used currently, and that's the one that we're wanting to change and replace, I just wanted to point out there are several errors in it, including I put calling Native Americans as Indians, which we know is very much incorrect. Regarding the social emotional learning that the district has shown for their new curriculum, I believe that that is meeting students where they are and are trying to get them the supports that they need. Not every child lives in a stable home, and due to the mental crisis our nation's professionals say that we are in, and I would believe that most people would agree with this, I believe it's necessary to support all students. Parents still have the choice to opt out their child. I do believe this aligns with the district's goal of character education, how to be kind, ensure people feel welcome, self-regulation, and how to go to an adult if you don't feel safe and get the supports that you need, which is critical. As teachers, we value the community's priorities and work to teach rigorous content. Our aim is to equip our students with the knowledge needed to succeed and to treat people with respect. If in doubt of any teacher's intentions, I hope our community does what I tell my students: verify, verify, verify. Thank you.
Theo Martin.
Hi, I'm a student at Lewis Palmer High School, and I recently wrote an over 20-page paper on how teen suicides in our school are actually affecting our students and what school board and community members can do in order to actually meet our students where they're at. And all of you should have a copy of that sent to your email. I know that I emailed Miss Wood a copy of that. But I would like to read a small excerpt from that paper. Losing people to suicide is maybe one of the worst ways to lose someone. You can't blame anyone, and as much as you want to, you didn't see it, you didn't do enough. What can you do? Don't kill yourself. Don't kill yourself, don't kill yourself. It's screamed from the rooftops after someone attempts. But does it actually help? 1 in 5 teens report severe thoughts of suicide, with 1 in 10 trying to take their lives. Everywhere, every day, faculty, especially teachers and school officials, try to find ways to prevent teen suicide, and the deaths hit hard to everybody, but their methods, and yours, are not where it's supposed to be. Pamphlets and emails blaring the don't kill yourself narrative aren't helping, and they won't help. So what will? Places to go, in-person connections, empathy, stopping this stupid circular chant, and addressing other variables are all ways that suicide prevention will actually be effective. I recently had a conversation with Miss O'Connor, the principal at Lewis Palmer High School, and we talked about the ways that we can actually achieve several of these things that I mentioned in my paper. The pamphlets and emails are constantly being sent, but as one of the staff at Lewis Palmer said during the Monumentaries preview, when she talked to people, they said that they didn't actually think that those emails were directed towards them. They were obviously directed towards people with suicidal teens, not their teens. But places to go and in-person events are really where we should be focusing our energy. We're currently pushing our entire teen social stratosphere online, and as we know, much of that online area is completely toxic. In my paper, I talk about just spending an hour on Instagram, and I found over 20 instances of people talking about suicide or saying that they will commit. Many of my friends and peers have also stated that they have had to help people not commit suicide, talk people off ledges. And so continuing to push our teens onto this social media websites and these text messaging systems are just pushing them towards that toxic and suicidal ideations. By creating these in-person events that are maybe easy to get to and cheap or free to for students to enter, as we've already discussed in this meeting, not every student has a person to give them a ride. Not every student can go to after-school activities, and so it's important that we still have these activities that people can go to that are close by, that are cheap, because not every student has the money to pay for these events. Creating areas where our teens can actually feel safe and have friends outside of the online area is so important to preventing teen suicides. Thank you.
Kara Martin.
My name is Kara Martin. I am an employee of the district. I am a parent of 4, including that fabulous one that just spoke, and a community member. Today is the 1-year anniversary of my father's death, and all I wanted to do tonight was have a nice meal with my family celebrating his amazing life. Unfortunately, I can't do that. My husband and I are here as de facto parental security in case the hate group Mothers of Liberty decided to show up when my child spoke. Make no mistake, they are in our community. Some of them even originated in our community. We must not let their bigotry take root or grow bigger in D38. The only difference between them and the other supremacy militia groups that hide in Colorado is their mascara.
Thank you. Mr. Clausen, are you with us? Mr. Clausen?
Can you try again?
Apologies.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just in time for board member comments. Thank you all for your public comments, and we will just start at the end of the table. Mr. Schwartz?
No comments, thank you.
Ms. Phillips?
I just wanted to say this evening that graduation is always a wonderful, joyous event, and I think the number of us were at 8th grade graduation, 6th grade continuations, and both high school graduations. So we're taking a little breather this week. But to that end, there were any number of teachers that I would look at and say congratulations, and many of them are so humble They are there to celebrate their students, which we all are, but I also want to recognize the teachers and the staff and the school leadership who get those students to where they are and who also take the time to celebrate with them. It is what I would consider the epitome of gracious professionalism as well. And so it's wonderful to know that even from our Barebotics team to our young students who are able to come up and make a public comment, to our teachers, to our administrators, and to my fellow board members, I hope that we all reciprocate gracious professionalism.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Mr. Norris.
I have no comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clausen.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Upchurch. I concur with the comments of Ms. Phillips. In addition to the Palmer Ridge and Lewis Palmer graduations, I also had the privilege of attending the 8th grade continuation that was held for Monument Academy at Palmer Ridge. It was also a wonderful event. Just want to congratulate everyone that has continued or has graduated, and also want to thank all of our team members for the incredible job they've done this school year.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Well, I'll finish out. I want to start by talking about what's the most important thing in this room, and that's our kids. And this month has been filled with a lot of joyous celebrations and graduations, and so I wanted to actually just send out a big, huge congratulations to our graduates and their families, and also our teachers and our staff for finishing on a strong year this year. And to those that are continuing on to new grades or new endeavors or new journeys, to use our favorite Dr. Seuss quote, you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're off to great places. This is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. So congratulations to another successful year. I also want to say thank you to our teachers and staff. The breakfasts and the lunches that we serve they're not enough to express our gratitude, but it was still a joy to be able to be in buildings and share in that with you guys. And I also wanted to say that our district staff and stakeholders accomplished actually quite a bit this year, from new ways to support our students, such as our United team now getting varsity letters, to establishing stakeholder-driven committees, diving deeper into our calendar, finding ways to close our gap, still not closed, but finding ways to help close the gap and increasing those opportunities for our teachers and our staff, and that we are still leaning in and listening, and there's still a lot of work that we will continue. And I also want to thank everybody for their public comments. We do lean in, we do listen, and we strive to increase that collaboration. And to that end, as we mindfully spend time deliberating on all the feedback, please know that we take all stakeholder input into account, and our district's success actually depends on our community and our families and our stakeholders. And regarding our transportation and busing, I believe Dr. Summers will be referencing that. I want to thank you and your team for visiting that with our families in our community that live out east of 83. And there's also some other meetings. We have our collaboration committee meeting. We have lots of work that's happening over the summer. So while school's out for summer, the work is not out for summer. So we will continue on. So just thank you very much. And with that, Dr. Summers.
Thank you, Mrs. Upchurch. Thank you, board. Thank you to the public. Appreciate all the commentary for this evening. So I actually have several bits of news and updates, and we're going to start with some celebrations as part of this update. So let's dive right in. Again, grounding ourselves in our priorities and our values and how we are working to elevate every student every day. So among the celebrations that we were able to participate in over the course of the past few weeks, some that were already called out, it's worth noting again that we had 290 graduates from Palmer Ridge High School, 241 graduates from Lewis Palmer High School, a total of 531, and we're incredibly proud of their accomplishments and excited about how they're moving on to some bright futures. Additionally, we'd like to share our celebrations and kudos for the month of May. So Corey Atkinson Palmer Ridge School Resource Officer, Chris Coulter, our Director of Operations, Danny DeBellis and Jamie Zolsdorf, Lewis Palmer Elementary School kindergarten teachers, Stephanie Markle, hi Stephanie, good job, as well as Dr. Michael Brahm, our Director of Assessment, and Kendra Leckenby, who is our resident Big Red custodian. Just appreciate all those kudos. I'm not going to read all those out loud, but you see them listed on the slides, and there's so many more that have continued to go the extra mile over the course of the year, so we're always excited to shout great work out. And then also something that occurred last week was recognition for our performance across a few of our schools as well as the district as a whole. So shout out to Bear Creek Elementary School for receiving the John Irwin Award, Lewis Palmer Elementary and Prairie Winds Elementary both receiving the Governor's Distinguished Improvement Award for really strong growth, as well as John Irwin for strong achievement. And then our district, again, being accredited with distinction. So we had the opportunity to have a few of our folks be recognized up at Colorado Department of Education last Thursday. And again, just very proud of those collective efforts. It's a testament to all the hard work across multiple staff, as well as great support from our parents and community, as well as great performance from our students. And then also, as alluded to, we had the opportunity to formally recognize our teachers and staff during the week of May 8th as part of our annual Staff Appreciation Week. And this was an opportunity to serve our folks, and there's just not enough ways to share that appreciation and the gratitude for all of the impact that our staff have on our students. But it's always a nice and enjoyable feature to be able to serve either breakfast or lunch. And then we actually have a couple recognitions that we're still engaging in this week with some of our grounds and maintenance groups. So shout out to every member of our team, and we appreciate that continuous opportunity to demonstrate that. So several news and updates, including several accolades that we'd like to share with you all, beginning with the Palmer Ridge High School Outdoor Learning Lab. So we have a partnership and are very appreciative of our local realtor, Anton Bobro, who pledged a $1,000 donation on May 4th. This was an idea spurred by our science teacher at Palmer Ridge, Jillian Johnson, who worked with Anton during her recent home buying process. So a big shout out there. Lewis Palmer High School has a tradition of excellence awards, including recognition for Ranger of the Year. And they do a really nice job of that formal recognition. And there were 2 senior Rangers of the Year, including Maya Brown and Alex Weeks, and then also additional students recognized for exemplifying the 5 pillars at Lewis Palmer High School, including character, with Jackson Markowitz, leadership, Caleb Pepper, academic perseverance, Riley Cudney, school involvement, Griffin McKay, and service to community, Molly Graham. So again, big shout out to all of those outstanding Rangers. Also very exciting is a President's Environmental Youth Award. So we have 3 Prairie Winds students who have won national recognition: Amelia Ashby, Sloan Clary, and Annabelle Montero, all recognized by the EPA recently for their receiving of the President's Environmental Youth Award. So each year the White House selects a handful of projects from hundreds of submissions, and these students won out for instituting a composting program featuring earthworms to turn organic refuse into compost. Did you follow all that, Mr. Schwartz? Just making sure you're paying attention. So the EPA credited Amelia, Sloan, and Annabelle with being brave, following through on the project, as well as educating their peers in the entire community. And they will actually be recognized in Washington, D.C., I believe, right before the school year begins. So we may be welcoming them back for additional recognition at our upcoming board meeting. Just outstanding work by these students. We have international DECA major success. So Palmer Ridge DECA team has taken 3rd on the highest competition stage. So kudos to Amy Berliner and Alexis Burns for hundreds of hours spent refining, researching, and executing their buying and merchandising operations research presentation, only to medal and be recognized on an international stage in front of 20,000 individuals. And of course, we have great success across both of our DECA programs, and a big shout out to our staff who make that a possibility, but outstanding work by these two young ladies. Wanted to reference the Aliorum Day Awards, which was hosted a few weeks back. So big kudos for making a difference in the life of our students with disabilities. And our Special Education Advisory Committee has hosted the event over the past 6 years. This was our highest number of nominees ever this year. Our staff award went to Stacy Campbell, Evan Cochran, Kylie Palmer, and the entire D38 transitions team. Student awards, I don't know if I'll read all the names, but there's several there, as well as a community award. So there's just a very special evening. Big shout out to Mr. Rick Frampton and his team for helping make that event a possibility. Very excited about that recognition, and a nice picture of our award winners as well. We have been collaborating with some local veterans, so big shout out and thank you to both Randy Fritz and Mike Christensen, who have collaborated with our Palmer Ridge team to visit AP Human Geography and give a presentation ahead of Memorial Day. So we appreciate that background, expertise, and that ongoing partnership as we work to provide some authentic learning experiences from folks in our community. And then our National Speech and Debate Award. So Brian Hoff of Lewis Palmer High School is the winner this year of the National Diamond Coach Award, which recognizes a professional career that combines excellence and longevity in speech and debate education. This happens to be his 3rd Diamond Award, so huge shout out there. Our art show that was hosted through the majority of the month of April had more than 45 students who received awards and recognition in partnership with Air Academy Federal Credit Union. Another big shout out for that partnership. Our walls are a little more bare, as you can see, but we are actually, we took a step this year to offer some additional dollars to the students for their artwork. So you will begin to start to see some of that artwork displayed in different areas of our building. And our students earned more than $4,000 in scholarships from AAFCU, with more than $100,000 awarded over the past 30 years. Just quite a tremendous accomplishment that way. Lewis Palmer High School CTE celebrations. So Groninger Concrete has donated materials, and our construction students poured and finished a concrete path just, I think it was 2 weeks ago now because of our delay in our meeting. And then Palmer Ridge High School has engineering projects, including the engineering design and development final project to industry partners after much work in developing real solutions to modern problems. Another art scholarship mention, so big thank you to the Palmer Lake Art Group for awarding Isabel Cotton from Palmer Ridge High School with the 2023 Art Scholarship, which will provide $2,500 for Isabel's art education. She'll be attending Temple University in Japan, which is a pretty cool opportunity. And we also have a resident Taekwondo master, our very own Brett Mislick from Palmer Lake Elementary. So he represented the United States at the Asia Pacific Masters Games in South Korea and took home gold. So major congratulations to Brett. If you recall, so this is, again, going back a few weeks, but the international dinner that we hosted at Lewis Palmer High School, just a big kudos to Tiffany Brown and Margarita Battaglia, who helped collaborate to put on our most recent international dinner, recognizing multilingual students and families and those who have helped our multilingual students make D38 feel more like home. So hundreds of families participated and enjoyed international dishes, games, crafts. It was a very cool event. Thank you for those that attended. So more student learning exemplified. 4th grade classes at Bear Creek recently capped off their economics unit with a market day. So students in Mrs. Rael and Mrs. Perry's classes have been learning tenets like the value of $1, saving money, banking, and recurring expenses like taxes all year. And last week, again, 2 weeks ago, students withdrew the BCES bucks they earned throughout the year and put on a market where students bought and sold handmade crafts. So it exemplifies what our students are learning, that they can apply in the real world, and all that good financial literacy can happen even as early as the elementary grades. So big shout out there. And then we are home to another state champion, recent state champion. Geneva Gigi took home first place in the 4A track and field state championships for discus. We actually had several individuals place at the track and field championships, and the overall updates for a men's Palmer Ridge High School came in 12th overall, for a men's Lewis Palmer High School came in 16th. And our women's teams, 6th overall for Palmer Ridge, 26th overall for Lewis Palmer High School, so big shout out there. As well as additional athletes who've completed the playoff level. So we had multiple teams that qualified for state championships, or playoffs rather, and we want to give a lot of luck to the baseball playoffs coming up on May 26th and 27th, as well as golf on May 30th and 31st. So we're still winding the spring sports season down. A few other updates. One that you'll maybe hear about a little bit more as we go through the next series of steps is that we have tested all of our elementary sites for lead per new state regulations. And like many other or all other districts in the state, we did have some results that were higher than the 5 parts per billion that is recognized by the new law. But we're in the process of mitigation, and at this time has not incurred any cost to us, but there's just a lot of testing, and Mr. Coulter is having a lot of fun in his lead testing project. As I think he said earlier this morning, he is one with the state. That's a pretty profound statement there. As alluded to a little bit earlier this meeting, we do have an Eastern Bus Consolidation meeting that we've scheduled, and this is for tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. We appreciate all the feedback that has come forward thus far. We are engaging in an ongoing process at this point to really hear what that feedback is sharing with us in order to make some potential adjustments to the plans that we had shared back on May 2nd. So just want to reiterate that we're going to continue to be in an ongoing partnership in that effort, and my apologies for not being able to facilitate that even sooner. So we're leaning in. We're going to take all of this, and we're going to figure out what our best next steps are. So appreciate, again, our community's feedback in that process. And then just another note involving staffing, and that is that we will be seeing a transition in the principalship at Kilmer. So Mr. Brian Pohl is actually moving into an interim assistant principal role at Lewis Palmer High School. And Greg Saunders, who's currently assistant principal at Lewis Palmer, will be transitioning into the interim principal role at Kilmer for next year. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that process will look like for those ongoing selections into the 23-24 school year, but did want to give that shout out. And I apologize that Mr. Saunders isn't able to join us tonight, but we'll look forward to introducing him to you all at some point in the near future. Also just wanted to close with a recap of our Engage and Elevate Spring Community Connections. And thank you to our board for being present at many of these events. It really had some rich dialogue, and I think it was something that we were very excited about in terms of the format, because it allowed us to really listen to what feedback was coming our way. So here are 4 key themes that I think summarize, at least at this point, what we're continuing to hear as a result of these Engage and Elevate opportunities. So at a very high level, community engagement. So I listed some questions here that kind of fall under each of these categories. How do we continue to build effective engagement with our community and strengthen our relationships with the district and our constituents? Always a lot of questions around Colorado school finance and funding related issues. And I think it was said very poignantly, how do we simplify? And I think that was echoed actually a little bit earlier in some public comment. There's just a lot of information to process through. So how do we make sure we're making sense of it that leads to a really good understanding and an opportunity for next steps with our community? And I think that bridges into just a bigger concept of how do we continue to educate and inform? How do we have the right information, quote unquote, at the ready? A lot of good feedback about what information is available on our website. Sometimes people are looking for things, maybe can't find them. As a quick aside, just as a note, and I think you all are aware of this, our website is actually, our new website with new vendor is going to be going live tomorrow. And we believe that this will actually present an opportunity to get really good information in the hands of our community and really good feedback in a two-way process to make that website as one feature of what we can provide as available information to our community. So we're looking forward to continuing to get better in those areas. And then lastly, just kind of a big overarching concept around curriculum, assessment, grading considerations, and then another real interesting point around how we can layer the portrait of a graduate around our core academics. So we just want to thank everybody that did have the opportunity to attend and participate. We look forward to continuing to refine our approach with Engage and Elevate. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we'll continue to lean in with our community in that respect. And that, as I'm clicking and there's no other slide, is actually the end of the presentation. So anything I can help address or clarify in this process?
Any questions or comments, Mr. Schwartz?
No, thank you.
Ms. Phillips?
I'd just like to elevate and thank Mark Belcher for his work on the new website. So it'll be interesting to see it, but I know that that's an extensive lift. So thank you.
Good shout out.
Mr. Norris?
No, thank you.
Mr. Clausen?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Summers.
Thank you.
At this time, we will move on to items under C, and our first item is item number 1, which is to consider approve a reversal of the board office of vice president and appointment of secretary. And just to give a follow-up where that comes from is it had been brought to our attention that during our April 17th meeting, we may have received some misguided information and we thought we were reorganizing, but the vice president position was never vacant, and so we should have done a vacancy, which would have filled the president's role, and then concurrent to that, filled the secretary's role. So to correct the situation, we will be redoing that, not the president's role, but the vice president. We'll be taking a motion for that. And this does not change. We also conferred with legal today. It doesn't change any of the actions that the board has done. We are all duly elected and appointed board members to our director districts. So each of us have one vote. So every vote we've made thus far is still legally binding. Let me open it up to questions and comments from the board.
Ms. Upchurch, may I make a motion?
Yes, sir. Well, wait, just make sure that we don't have any more questions or comments first.
Yeah, I got a few comments, but maybe we do it after the motion.
Oh, let's do it before so that we can have discussion, and then we'll make the motion. Yes, we'll do the motion, and then we'll open it up for comments and questions. Yes, sir.
Okay, I move to revoke the vote taken for the election of the office of Vice President on April 17th, 2023, and reinstate Ms. Teresa Phillips as Vice President and appoint Mr. Norris as the Board Secretary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Norris, would you accept that position?
Yes, happily.
We'll open it up for questions and comments.
Yeah, mistakes are okay, right? As long as we learn from our mistakes. There's a lot of misinformation online regarding this particular kerfuffle that we've gone through. So really, from a learning perspective, I'd really like to know what data we were looking at and who was involved in the decision that led us up to the reorganization decision. What was legal input at that time versus now, and most importantly, because us board members, Ms. Wood, Dr. Summers, we're not always going to be here. What mechanism do we have in place to prevent this from happening again?
Mr. Norris, if I may, I can speak to some, and then maybe perhaps Superintendent Summers can follow me. So as I understand it, this is a process or procedural error We had been in touch with legal counsel multiple times in the week moving up to April 17th. And in previous times, when there was a vacancy, there has at times been a different process. So we were trying to be as fastidious as we could. I think in being as fastidious as we could, we had worked on setting up a procedure such that we overlooked that generally a vice president at times moves up to a president's spot, which leaves a vice president's seat open, in which case then you would take nominations for a vice presidency. So I think it was an oversight in part because we got down a little bit of a detail pathway. I do want to recognize that in no way do I mistake Ms. Upchurch taking nominations for vice presidency as anything intentional.
Thank you.
Does that clarify everything that you were speaking to?
Yes, but the last piece, do we need a mechanism or a policy adjustment in place?
So as I understand and what we spoke with legal counsel today, our policy is completely in line with state statute, state law. And to that end, our legal counsel also numerous times said reorganizations and refilling of vacancies at times, it's not uncommon to have a mistake like this, but it is important that we be as thorough as we can so that it doesn't happen again. I think all three of the reorganizations or replacements of vacancies that I've been here for have been different, but I think to that end, I think the other main point that I have learned is that rather than work from a strict script, it's really important that all of us have discussion and that we are thinking as we are doing this process because it was such a fluid process, and also to the very best of our ability and professional attributes that we communicate as thoroughly and consistently as we can ahead of time.
I would add that I think that perhaps visiting our policy, and we can narrow it down to be very specific in our policy on if event A occurs, this is how it's done. We can definitely visit policy in the future on this.
Yeah, our understanding is the policy is in clear alignment with the law. The detail, as Ms. Phillips spoke to, that we just did not, in conversations with legal, have fully accounted for was depending on who was voted in, that may or may not have required the vote that actually took place. And I think we were reading straight from a script that was designed and vetted by legal at that time. And it truly was an innocent oversight from that angle. I don't know that the policy in and of itself requires adjustment. There could be the opportunity to introduce a regulation corresponding to that policy, and that would be future work that this board could pursue that could set that table for future boards that may be taking that type of action, because to Ms. Phillips' point also, I think there has been different variations to how that procedure has taken place. And then I would echo that one additional point, which is that communication and making sure everyone's on the same page. To that end, I just want to commend Ms. Phillips at that time for, I mean, we were in multiple conversations with legal and trying to, dot every I, cross every T, and even with that effort, unfortunately, this just became one of those issues we did not fully anticipate. So that's the learning I think that we have as a result.
Dr. Summers, thank you. Ms. Phillips, thank you for your explanation. Ms. Upchurch, thank you. One last important note, as much history as I've searched, D38 school board has never had two sitting females in the president and vice president role. I think we need to recognize that, and I'm honored to serve under both of you. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. I would like to say one further thing. If there are additional questions or clarifications that the Board of Education can provide for anybody in the public, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via our cell numbers, which are available, or you may email us directly. Thank you.
That's what she said.
And can I add one more point, Ms. Upchurch, from that angle? As a district, we did issue here were the steps that were taken, here was the process that was followed. Based on the action that you all will take this evening, we will update that statement as early as tomorrow, no later than, to make sure that this is now updated and currently reflected, so that, again, there's a statement that can correspond to the board's position and action.
And I also want to say finally that when you're leading and you're leading with integrity, it also means that if there's a mistake made, that you turn it around and correct it and do the right thing. So, sir.
Thank you. So along the lines of what Ms. Upchurch said, most importantly for the public, looks like a mistake was made, looks like it was recognized, and the team moved swiftly to fix it, because intra-board dynamics does not help us move our mission forward. Our mission forward is quality, safe education, and taking care of our kids. So the faster we get this taken care of and move forward, the faster we can move forward on our mission.
Agreed, sir. Agreed, sir. Well said, everyone. Mr. Clausen, did you have any final comments?
Well, first I want to thank Mr. Norris for the brief time that he served as a VP. I think it might be the shortest time in District 38 history.
Thank you.
You know, I think it's also important to note that, first of all, Ms. Phillips and Dr. Summers, thank you for working with counsel. Attorneys, like anyone else, occasionally make mistakes. But I think it also should be noted that when Ms. Upchurch was approved as the board president, she was simply reading the script that was prepared even before she knew she was going to be board president. So it looks like this could be a learning experience for all of us, and I'm glad we're able to work through it. Ms. Upchurch, can I add one more thing?
Yes, sir.
And it's written in the public content of this agenda item, but I think in light of the fact that part of the feedback we've heard from the community has suggested that due to the unnecessary vote that was taken around the vice president, that there may be an allegation of this board being invalid. And in conferring with legal counsel, positions of officership do not have any merit when it comes to you all being duly elected or appointed, and the actions that you've taken, both in April 17th and in subsequent meetings, still stand, still hold. And I just wanted to call that out while we're here and we're talking through all those angles, because I think that's an important dynamic we just want to make sure everybody is aware of.
Yes. Yes, sir. And that was conferred with legal today as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Wood?
Mr. Clausen?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
Aye. All right, moving along to C number 2, Parent and Community Advisory Committee, the PCAC update. Our co-chairs this year were Kelly Bain and Holly Rollins, sorry. And they were fantastic leaders. And then our staff leaders were Ms. Amber Wetstein and Dr. Brahm. So thank you for joining us today. And we accomplished a lot in PCAC this year.
I'm going to make an introduction brief this evening and then pass it off to Kelly Baines and Dr. Brahm for the presentation, but I wanted to start by recognizing Kelly for her leadership as a co-leader on what we are now calling the PCAC, Parent and Community Engagement Committee. 2 years as our co-leader, giving up of her own time and helping us to have just a wonderful, productive advisory team. So thank you, Kelly, and these are for you, and we appreciate all you have done for the district.
And this presentation does align with priority 6, which is building strong relationships through effective communication. I will stay to help field questions as needed and pass it off to Kelly and Dr. Brom.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you, I appreciate that. It's been a pleasure serving. Okay, well, as the 2022-23 school year comes to a close, we do appreciate the opportunity to update you on the activity of the Parent and Community Advisory Committee over the last year. And what I'll do is I'll just provide a brief purpose of the committee as well as its structure, what we focused on over the past year, and then some of the areas of focus for next year. So please feel free to ask questions as we go. There's no reason to wait. Okay, so as was mentioned, PCAC was formerly DAC, and I will explain why that change was made in just a few minutes, but just to clarify that confusion. The overarching purpose really of PCAC is to promote engagement and to provide a voice for the community into the district matters. And more specifically, as part of that, it's a source of input into the Board of Education strategic priorities. And so that's kind of the community vehicle to help bring some of that input into the work that all of you do and into the work of the district. Another thing that it provides is it's an opportunity for the district to share information with this committee, and then the committee gets an opportunity to provide feedback on that, and it can be school-specific and program offerings and those types of things. So it is a good way to bring input into the things that you do every day. It also fulfills legislative requirements, and that is the review and input into school improvement initiatives and plans, the budget review and input into the budget, as well as teacher evaluation systems. So those are the basic purposes of the committee. Over the last year, we held 6 meetings, and 5 of those were actually at different schools. We visited Lewis Palmer Middle School, Lewis Palmer Elementary, Monument Academy East, Bear Creek, and Kilmer. And I think what's really good about that, this is in addition to our normal agenda content. It really does give the membership a chance to understand a little bit more about what's going on in our schools and the types of programs that are being offered. And it really is a very energizing thing for the committee to be able to see how exciting things are going on for the benefit of our students within the schools. And so that's the reason we've kind of taken that approach, and obviously next year then we'll hold those meetings at additional schools. It gives us a chance to eventually to see the whole district at a different level. There are 2 co-chairs, as was mentioned, myself and Holly Rollins. Tiffany is our Board of Education liaison, and Dr. Brom is our administrative liaison. There are members on this committee, parents and staff from all of the schools. So it is a broad-reaching and very robust committee. Also, it's been great to have student representation as well. Last year we had Kaylee Klein of PR and Emma Bora of Monument Academy, and that's a very welcome opportunity to have students involved with this committee as well, as is Harriet Halbig as a community representative also. So as you can see, it is a very broad representation. It's a very robust committee with a lot of engagement and a lot of participation across the community. Another thing that we do as a regular part of the agenda is that we receive reports from some of the committees that address more specific areas in the district, those including special education, gifted education, as well as the wellness committee. So those reports are part of our agenda as well. So over this past year, some of the things that we did, as we mentioned, we did update the bylaws as well as change the name. The overarching reason for the name change is that we wanted the name to more clearly communicate and reflect the fact that this is intended to be a format to encourage parent and community involvement in the district. And I've been involved with this, I think, for like 7 or 8 years now in various capacities at different levels. And one of the conversations that regularly came up is how do we expand the involvement of our community through these vehicles? Because they really are wonderful programs, and they provide some great opportunity for both education of the public as well as input from the public. So how do we get that message out there and get broadened communication? And so the hope was, by not having terms like DAC and BAC and those types of things that are often kind of confusing for people, that actually calling it parent and community advisory would help with that. So we'll see. We'll see if that accomplishes it, but it's certainly a first step towards that.
Did you have more participation this year?
Well, we did that. I think, I would say definitely at the district level, I think it's very robust. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I do think we have very regular attendance and communication. The community part might be an area for some improvement. I know some of the bigger issues, I think, have been at the school level in communicating what these committees are and really getting parents to show up for these meetings and engage that way.
It might be just a suggestion to dovetail the engage and elevate sessions with some of the meetings.
And we've done that in the past.
That's a great idea. One of the other areas of activity, the committee did provide input into the Board of Education strategic priorities, specifically priorities 1 through 3. We also reviewed the budget and provided input on that. A major area of discussion throughout the year was several things, actually. One, results of the mill levy override election. Teacher compensation, school calendar, those were some of the other topics that I think that were major discussions throughout the year. And I will say that PCAC is very engaged and very supportive of the initiatives ongoing around teacher education and teacher compensation, and are very supportive of that and excited to see what happens with those. So you definitely have advocates in this group for the efforts going on there. So for looking forward to 2023, so Holly Rollins will become chairperson. We serve 2-year terms, so she will roll into that primary chairperson role, and then a new co-chair will be identified at the beginning of next year. And obviously the committee will continue to prioritize using this committee to increase engagement and input into the district, specifically around the strategic priorities of the board. It's also been talked about to re-engage the Financial Transparency Committee and also to include those reports as part of the PCAC agenda, just to really pull each of these committees together and make sure that we're sharing what's being done across these committees. Based upon some legislative changes, the educator evaluation system will also be something that PCAC will talk about and provide input on next year, as well as looking for ways to continue to grow the level of engagement and input and participation of both parents and the community into the district matters. So that's what I have. Any other questions, comments, discussion?
Board?
I had a couple questions. So first of all, thank you for,
You're welcome.
I'm guessing you get paid about what we get paid.
I think so.
I'd like to make a motion to double our pay. And ours. So this is a great conduit for all of us to get direct, real-time feedback, and super important and valuable to make sure that we're taking that feedback and doing something with it. If we go back, for example, to slide 6, were there a conclusion or two that came out of these areas of focus that stand out in your mind that we can ensure have impact?
What is slide 6? Is it the committee report?
Yes.
Priorities and activities.
Ours are numbered this way? Okay. Well, there were a couple of areas that I think the committee really engaged with. One was around the portrait of a graduate as well as the portrait of the educator. And I do think there was some really good discussion about those and how those can be used and broadened. So I do think that that was a specific area of input. Budget is always tricky because it is so complex. So you have to spend quite a bit of time educating before you can really expect very much useful feedback. But I do think there was very strong consensus that figuring out how to use the resources we have to better compensate our teachers is worth the time and effort. And that was certainly an area that PCAC was very supportive of what you're trying to do, given our budget constraints.
I think, if I may, there's another one in terms of the committees that report to them, such as the Wellness Committee.
Yeah.
They've revised and brought our current policy up to, I don't know the terminology, state.
Make it current.
State requirements. or
Not only
requirements.
current, but there are requirements. Ms. Baker can speak to it better than I can later. And so all of those committees are working within PCAC as well. So I think that that's very effective for us to get those policy revisions.
Okay.
I'll also add the PCAC, it was a while back, so Kelly may not remember well, but we did an extensive input session on the action plans that were approved by the board within our Unified Improvement Plan, and we took feedback directly from the group to help improve those actions and the measures.
Thanks. Secondly, taking this to move forward, are there areas of focus that you're considering for the next school year? And if so, what are they?
Well, yeah, actually. So that was kind of what we were looking at in here. So it would be, obviously, the remaining strategic priorities would be a part of that. Educator evaluation system would be an area of focus for next year. And I really do think one of the things that is less topic and more process is how do we best utilize a limited meeting time to both educate people at a level where they can provide good input and also allow for a lot of that good discussion that happens during meetings. Our agendas are very full, and it's always a tricky balance between educating and allowing for input and discussion. And so that's one of the things that we've talked about is how do we continue to do that better and better? Because that is a tricky balance when you're meeting 5 to 6 times a year and you're accomplishing a lot of different objectives. So I do think this committee is a robust committee. I mean, these are some of your most engaged people throughout the district, parents and community people as well as staff, who attend very regularly, and they're very engaged. They ask a lot of great questions and provide a lot of good input. So how do we best take advantage of that is, I think, part of the challenge, the process challenge.
So one of the places I was leading to was, given this wonderful real-time conduit we have to our customers and our constituents and our staff, we would be great to merge the goals of 2024 and the focus areas as we lead down to the path to get from our current state in our strategic plan to our desired state. Because if we do it with congruence, it's a lot easier to push a rock uphill. So thank you.
Some of the things that I stood out to me throughout the year on the PCAC is the robust discussion that occurred on how do we engage our community and our parents. And there was a lot of discussion around the name and the meaning and the mission of the committee, and some bylaw changes. And part of that structure of the other committees that are throughout our school district, whether they're ones that are legally formed out of statute under the committee, or ad hoc committees, the calendar, our staff collaboration committee, and what those look like and how they align and how they can work together in separate and together. There's a lot of discussion and some bylaw changes on that. The committee looked long and hard at our calendar and came up with suggestions and ideas to bring forth. There's a policy that we as a board are looking at that came from the Wellness Committee that is also a part of the PCAT committee. So there was a lot of actionable, and of course the improvement plan. So there was a lot of engagement, I felt, and I saw a lot more open engagement and a lot more discussion in this year's committee than in the past. And I would actually challenge that our strategic committee was born out of the PCAC, of parents and community members saying, what more can we do? How can we get engaged? What can we want to push forward together? And so I think there was a lot of engagement on that level too. Any other comments? Mr. Norris?
No comments.
Ms. Phillips?
No, thank you.
Mr. Clausen?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we look forward to next year as well.
Thank you for the flowers.
Our next item up is to consider and approve student fees for the 2023-2024 school year. Mr. Ridgway and Ms. Wetstein. Can't speak today, Wetstein.
You will see in board docs the proposed fees for the upcoming school year. There are minimal changes to the fee structure as compared to our current school year. And thank you to Mr. Ridgway for putting together a comparison table that you can reference to see what those changes are. In some cases, fees were consolidated or increased slightly, and in other cases, they decreased slightly, but there were no substantial changes. These fees are charged per student for participation in these activities, and they are intended to be as exact amount as we can anticipate for the cost of these activities. We're happy to answer any questions you have. I know you may notice there is an increase to the transportation costs, which I'm not finding on here right now. Here we go. We are increasing the transportation costs slightly to offset mileage and maintenance costs.
Oh. Any comments or questions?
So I had a couple quick questions, and they may be inherent in here. I just didn't see it in reviewing the stuff. On the student fees in general, when we change them, are they a one-to-one correlation of cost changes?
I'm not exactly sure I understand the
If-
question, but
if
they are intended to be the per student cost of materials and supplies as an example for participation in that activity.
So if our costs go up on a per student basis by $3, we raise it. It's a one-to-one correlation. Sounds like.
As best we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And these fees were reviewed by the educators. This isn't something that we made these decisions here. They were reviewed at that level, firsthand level where those activities are happening.
Okay. Second one was just one of lack of knowledge on the transportation fees. You've got punch cards, and then I assume that $250 per year is an all-you-can-eat plan, right?
Yes.
Yes. Is a ride one-way or round trip? Because punch card's 20 rides.
We might need Mr. Coulter.
Is he not busy being one with the state?
I'm just counting my letters.
Well done.
Rides are one
Ru-
way or round trip?
Punch cards are it's a round trip, but you buy one and it's a round trip.
Right.
But then when you buy the 230 or 250, as we have it proposed for next year, it's for the entire year.
Right.
Per student.
Okay. Got it. It sounded like the break even was about 110 or so rides. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I appreciate that students who qualify for free or reduced lunches are eligible for a waiver. Can you speak to students in unique circumstances who may also receive a reduction or a waiver?
I think we would have to take those about on a case-by-case basis. I don't have a specific situation in mind to speak to off the top of my head, but of course, we would always work with families when they're in a unique situation to support them the best we can.
That's why I was bringing that up, just so that families are aware that if they are in a situation where they may need some financial help, that you'll do what you can.
To follow up on Ms. Phillips' question, how are we doing that now that we have the free lunch program was the mechanism, the trigger mechanism? How are we doing that now to make sure that our families that need that support aren't falling through the cracks?
We do everything we can to promote that process with our families, and so we provide education about how to complete that paperwork during back-to-school nights and open houses. We utilize our family liaison to support Spanish-speaking families. The process has not changed, even though we are moving to a free lunch program. Families still need to complete that paperwork to take advantage of these other resources.
And then my next question, I guess, is for Dr. Summers. After tomorrow's meeting, if it's determined that there's an opportunity for these families and it is an increase in fee, which has been suggested, which I'm not advocating one way or another, we can come back and still adjust that?
Yeah, so currently, the plan as we proposed it actually offered a discount to families who would be utilizing the centralized stops. So depending on where that plan takes us, of course, if there's still some element of the centralized stops, we would still offer that discount. I believe it's 50% of that total fee. If the plan were to be very similar to what we've been doing, then I think the negotiating factor to that would be the charge would be the full amount. So that's kind of the base level that we would be working with. But again, we want to be fair and certainly equitable, and we'll take all that into consideration before anyone's charged anything. Does that help answer?
Yeah, and I'm going to take a out of order point and take a president privilege and say, and ask, has nothing to do with this. Can you please report back to the board on the meeting from tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion
Yes, Ms. Phillips.
to approve student fees for the 2023-2024 school year as presented by district administrators.
Is there a second?
There is. Second.
Discussion? Mr. Clausen?
No, nothing. Thank you.
Mr. Norris?
Nothing.
Ms. Phillips? Mr. Schwartz? Ms. Woods, will you take the roll?
Mr. Clausen.
Aye.
Mr. Norris.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz.
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch.
Aye. All right, thank you so much. Moving right along, consider and approve updated 2023-24 certified and classified staff pay schedules. Mr. Ridgway, you can stay right where you are for a little bit.
No, I moved to the left, the command chair here.
Ms. Upchurch, can I
C4.
I think we're on preliminary budget first.
Oh, I see, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. We're still, do you need to move back to that seat?
I get.
Preliminary budget presentation.
Okay, item C4, preliminary budget presentation. So state statute requires that you, I should say, receive a proposed budget by May 31st every year. So it's not adopt, it's not approve, it's not discuss even theoretically, but of course we want to do that. But you want to receive this budget. So this presentation is the budget proposal that you can receive, and which is consistent with the things that we have been talking about through the course of the spring here of how this budget would be developed. So a couple of things that I will have to adjust this page, and I will, for the board officers after tonight, so thanks for that. But I do want to go through, and again, the point of this type of receipt of this would be really to make sure that we understand and have some consensus on what are the high-level priorities that the budget is being developed on, and what will happen between now and the end of June when we consider for adoption of the proposed budget is filling in a lot of the details, a lot of the really granular molecular stuff that has to come behind the scenes in this. So I wanted to go through some of these early slides and just reiterate some of these conversations that we've had through the course of the spring, again, about how this has come together. This first slide here about the strategic and process priorities of developing a budget for this year. So this is not the strategic priorities of the district. This is about developing this budget. So we want to establish a philosophy and really a formula that was visible and transparent that connects projected changes in school finance revenue to general fund expense. Most of our money, most of our revenue comes from the School Finance Act. Most of our spend goes to personnel. So those are the two things that we wanted to make sure that we have focus on really throughout the course of this conversation, and that's what we have done. As part of that, we wanted to involve and solicit input from the district staff and their delegates via the Staff Collaboration Committee. That has been, I think, a really successful endeavor this year that we began back in the fall and have had great conversations all along the way. And so that has been a really good positive. We want to get innovative with ideas and process that can facilitate changes that are, quote, greater than the norm. And so I'll talk more to that in a little bit. And improve overall precision in budgeting that can prevent fearful budgeting. That's what I see a lot in a lot of school districts, that no one wants to make a mistake, and no one certainly wants to make a mistake on the bad side, meaning overspending and under budgeting. And so that can lead someone to be conservative on top of conservative on top of conservative. And if you do that too many times, you end up with something that's really not a useful budget. So we have to be precise instead, not be fearful, and know exactly where we're being conservative, and to keep those things clear and limited, so that in the vast majority of the situations we can say the best answer is the best answer. This is what we believe will happen. So from my perspective, that's kind of the budget philosophy and the strategic and process that I wanted to implement in terms of this year's budget development. And then here are the drivers of budget for 23-24. School Finance Act revenue, as I mentioned, is the far and away the big driver on the revenue side, and that's increasing by 10.2% to $10,000 per student. This is almost a once in a lifetime type of event, if you will. Unprecedented. Hard to see how it would replicate in the future either. So this is something to be aware of, to take advantage of, to do as much as we can with it, but also not to over project and say, well, we're going to go 10% per year going forward. Not going to happen, right? This is a very limited event.
Just to reiterate how important and impactful this is, in your experience, which is in excess of 2 decades, right?
Yep.
Which means you started when you were 7. How sustainable is a budget per pupil budget level at this level?
It will sustain at the $10,000. I don't think it will erode underneath that, but will it grow by another $1,000 next year, which would be another 10%? no, that would not be very likely to happen.
So it's indicative then that the state is comfortable with its revenue position going forward.
With what it knows now, yes.
Right. Okay. So that's important for us and our constituents as we plan out things beyond 12 months, right? And also as we make considerations around where the state is economically and its bets that they're making. And I think historically, with the exception of one or two blips in the last 100 years, the state's had a pretty good track record in that regard.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you.
Sure. So our main drivers there are per pupil revenue rate and the funded student count. Those are the two drivers of the formula that is the School Finance Act. So the revenue rate, again, increasing by 10.2%. The volume change is really flat. As you can see, I note a slight decrease there for the operated schools, a slight increase overall for the district. And that does mean that Monument Academy, which is welcoming a senior class, a senior high school class for the first time next year, is having some growth. Part of that is that natural fulfillment of that endeavor of having high school. And so because we have a positive rate variance and a negative volume variance, what we see is overall revenue from the School Finance Act, again for the operated portfolio, increasing by $4.67 million. The rate side of that is actually greater at $4.9 million and just a small volume decrease of negative $230,000. Another particular point is that capital maintenance projects are slated to receive funding at a pre-pandemic annual level to prevent further erosion in facility quality. This goes back to conversations we had back in January. And what pre-pandemic annual level means is that this year in 22-23, we funded capital maintenance projects at $2 million. Next year, we would fund it at $3 million. And so making it, again, to a level that is more consistent with what we've done in the past and what would be prudent for us to maintain going forward. Interest income, inflation has a good side to it, and that is that we have interest income happening for the first time in forever. And so we've been able to use some of that in not only in this year, 22-23, but then projecting some of that going forward into 23-24, since we don't have any real projections of interest rates coming down in the foreseeable future.
Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
With the ESSER dollars expiring next year, how will how much does that impact this?
Well, the ESSER dollars expiring does have an impact on our programming and our staffing, and so we've been able to incorporate that as those decisions, as those evaluations have been made to project next year. So yes, so that reduction in revenue, which is outside of the School Finance Act, so that's why it isn't summarized here. It's a grant revenue stream, and as that goes away, then the roles and the services that have been funded with that would also then either need to be absorbed into the general fund or would go away as well. And we have some of both happening. So next page on general fund expenses. As I mentioned, my first priority with budget development, I wanted to have a good connection between what the revenue rate changes of the School Finance Act and what does that mean towards compensation. Because there should be a consistent correlation to that. Normally you'd see a slight erosion of, in this year case when we have a 10% growth in revenue on the rate side, we should see a slight erosion of that to probably about not 8, but around 9% for change in compensation. As you see there, I say normal application is about a quarter of that rate to increase non-pay items. And so the strategy this year, again, on general fund expenses was to backfill that normal erosion and then push ahead. And that ties back to that initial point of doing something greater than the norm this year, to take the challenge and the opportunity that this budget cycle would present and try and make a change in compensation that is really noticeable by our staff. A couple other things we're doing, health benefits program is enhanced by offering a health savings account, HSA, that provides a better low-cost option for staff. And I think important there is that we standardize the district investment for plan tiers. Prior versions of our health benefit program would have different cost profiles on the district side, meaning the employer share of benefits, depending on which plan the employee chose. The way that this is standardized now, there is no difference in the cost on the district side, meaning the district has no skin in the game. All in the skin of the decision is on the employee side. So they make the decision, they have the skin that either increases their cost or decreases their cost. The cost from the district side will be the same, whichever decision they make. A longevity and loyalty work anniversary bonus program is established for next year, and starting a special year 0 implementation at the end of this year, which we've talked about before, and that'll be a payment coming to staff here in about a week, I guess, week and a half.
And will that continue to be at the same time of year?
Yes. Okay. Yes, it all should be something towards the end of the year, a late May, early June payment.
Okay.
Other items for general fund expenses, we had this year, in this 22-23 year, a significant supplemental payment program for new hire and hard to fill positions, and sometimes new hire, hard to fill combined. And that was very effective this year in 22-23 in helping us backfill some of the attrition that we had experienced about a year ago. And so we wanted to maintain that, dial it back slightly. And again, we've talked a lot about this in the past. And so I don't think we'll use this as frequently. The volume side of this in 23-24 won't be as prevalent, but we will still have these opportunities to make sure that we can attract staff that we need in order to fill some open positions. Last bullet here is enhancement to the number of years experience awarded to the new hire teachers, or I should say licensed staff, with a corresponding re-stepping plan for current employees whose experience was truncated below the new standard at their own hire date. So this goes back to the policy GCBA-R, the regulation I should say, that we talked about in a prior board meeting, and how we were changing the number of years experience recognized from 9 up to 15. And because we had fallen way behind other districts on that particular issue. And different from other districts is the re-stepping plan for current employees. That hasn't always been the case. Sometimes that policy just changes and it moves forward, and that's what's necessary because of the volume and the cost that it could incur. That would be a big cost for us to do it once, and that's why we made a plan that kind of will work over the next 5-6 years in terms of re-stepping employees whose experience was truncated and get them up to a better point.
You shared this with the Staff Collaboration Committee, but could you share with the board how many employees that impacts?
The number, as we went through, the initial number was around 50. And we continue to evaluate and go through unique cases. We would have unique cases where someone first worked as a sub, and so therefore their hire date was different from their full-time role beginning. And so we've gone through a lot of interesting, unique situations, and so that number has increased. And now I think we're around. And then we've also had some resignations of people who were eligible and have decided to leave anyway. So right now I think we're up to about 58 people for a full single cost of that would be about $400,000, and we'll be spreading that $400,000 out over these coming 6 years.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So those are the big priorities, the big things that you would see in play in the general fund, that you will see in play in the general fund, excuse me, when we're presenting the details of that in next month. Just some reminders about some of the approach that we've taken through this is to talk about these 4 C's: compensation, calendar, capacity, and culture. And those have been a focus of conversations and a way of kind of organizing and bucketing the conversations that we want to have had. Important work was, again, with the SCC that we'd reviewed with you earlier this year about the survey results, which basically identified specific priorities that the staff wanted to see pursued going in the future here. And so the stars are there on the items that we have specifically in this budget put some tangible change to. And so it's four of those 10, and a fifth of those, as you can see, as we've noted before, wasn't really, ended up not being the issue that we thought it was, because that had already actually happened. So those other four are really good starting points for us, and good validations, again, of the work of the staff collaboration committee and how the staff provided input and how we were able to receive that and act upon it.
When do you anticipate visiting these other priorities, like number 3 or number 4, number 6?
Well, I think we would, as we
Number 9.
get into a new year and a new set of conversations with the SCC, that would be the time to bring these back to the table, see if anything changes. Is there any nuance? Is there any new issue that comes to play? And so those conversations, these won't be forgotten for sure, and those conversations would continue with a new round and probably re-identifying other opportunities, and also taking stock of how successful do we feel that these 4 have been, and is there more that we should try and pursue in any of these other 4.
When I look at these, I see some of these as items that are going to require community involvement, engagement in achieving those goals, or visiting those topics, such as number 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's part of the conversation that we had with the SEC, this year was to say, hey, there are some things here which we can move quicker on, and I think we have moved quickly on those that we can. Others that have those other tentacles and those other concentric circles of impact, that it takes a lot more conversation, a lot more planning, that makes it a very extended timeline to pursue something like that.
And if I can add to that, unique to calendar considerations for not next year, but the following year and beyond, Ms. Wetstein will be engaging a group of constituents that represent both staff, parents, community, specific to calendar considerations. We're going to engage in some work over the course of the summer. We envision a robust process with recommendations that we'll be able to bring forward probably late fall for that consideration specific to calendar. So those gray shaded days, I think, or gray shaded boxes rather, will be work that's in the process of being pursued.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz?
Yeah, before we go on to the next set of charts, may I highlight a couple of things that I think are quite noteworthy in the quality of work that's happened here? So if you go back to slide 6 for a minute, if you don't mind, Mr. Ridgway. I think it's slide 6, it may be 7. The funds from interest income. Last time we went through this in detail, we thought it might end the year somewhere in the $200,000 range. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah, and I actually can show that to you when we get to the item for the FP&A. But yes, $200,000 in the general fund is what we're looking towards, and we did include a good amount of that in the amended budget as well. There is still some additional that's coming in above and beyond the amended budget, but there was a good amount of that already included in the amended budget.
So the point for us as a team is these are real dollars, right? Mm-hmm. This is not insignificant. Secondly, an additional 1 to 2% from planned efficiencies. Is that 1 to 2% off roughly a $50 million number?
Yes. And I think the final answer on that would be about 1.5%.
So not to be too remedial, but that's about $750,000. So just those 2 items are near $1 million. Mm-hmm. that this team has found a way to innovate through to assist us and to begin to do some things like bridge the pay gap, to do some things like fix our capital improvement problems, which we have consistently kicked down the road for years and years. And everybody knows if you kick something down the road long enough, the cost to fix it goes up exponentially. So ultimately, it's a continuity of operations thing for us and a cost thing. Because the total cost of ownership is something, if you let it go too long, shoots way up.
And I would definitely like to add on to that to say that planned efficiencies is work that's happened at the school and department levels. You know, we were facilitating process, but the decisions were being made there. And also a lot of great work was happening at that level.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. Those are really noteworthy items that I wanted to make sure that we covered. So thank you and the teams and the buildings for bringing raw cash back into the district. Off to the eye charts.
There's some other charts, and you know, if you've noticed, you know, what I've been doing through the course of spring is basically building a skeleton and filling in pieces around it, and so that will continue as I get to the final budget package. And so some of the detail things I did go ahead and introduce here, like I have this section about the local support and mill levy history, and talking about, you know, specifically, you know, it's always good. We need to make sure that we understand and talk about property taxes in these 4 categories, because they get lumped in together. But that's part of the complexity of school finance, and it does all come together as local support. But how much of that local support is really locally driven, locally determined, and how much of it is kind of formulaic, either coming from a state statute perspective or the county taxation policy perspective in terms of abatements and School Finance Act. So that is information that always will be useful to have. Here's raw number data, and then here are some charts that again describe these trends over time. And what we see is generally as and particularly in this last chart, as assessed value has grown, which would be the line that goes across this graph, then we've seen mill levy rates go down over time. And that's kind of what you'd expect to see when for the most part, the rates are fixed, you know, with the exception of the mill levy override, of course, and the bond levy has a little bit of fixed nature to it, but not as much as the mill levy override. So that's mostly just history there and perspective for, again, for community, anyone who wants some of that information as they're considering the budget. And then we get into the section about enrollment, projecting what's happened in terms of past enrollment, how is that moving into the 23-24 estimate. Here it is by individual school and demonstrating the roll rate model that we developed to use to project enrollment for next year. And all of it leads to this, and this is something that is a similar format to what I present monthly in the FP&A section, but this is just like that page. As I've mentioned, that page is the one page that covers the statutory requirements of what you need to receive and what you need to know and understand in terms of revenue, expenses, and fund balance. That's what's useful there in the FP&A, the monthly actual reporting, and then it's also what's useful here in terms of looking at the total budget, seeing that all of that information by individual fund. So I can continue to zoom in here and just, you know, demonstrate how you would look at that and say for the 23-24 budget, we're looking at revenue and expenses of $52.1 million, coming off of this year's budget of 48.5 on the revenue side, 49.8 on the expense side, because that was an intentional drawdown of $1.3 million of fund balance, which a decision we made back in December for that winter supplemental payment to staff. Then we have just perspective on history of what happened last year, 21-22 year, in terms of how its budget and actual behaved. This is where I was noting some lack of precision in some of the expense budgeting that we had there. And so we wanted to endeavor to do better on that going forward. And on the right side is this walk forward of fund balance, and what do we want fund balance to be. This is a year-to-date actual number, so this label actually is not correct. I need to fix that. This indicates that it should be the budget activity of fund balance, but that's the actual activity of fund balance. So I apologize for that, and I'll make correction to that in the next iteration. One of the things that you'll see here is something that we've talked about, and something I will continue. I'll actually bring some more attention to in the FP&A presentation is identifying this separate fund for mill levy override operations spending. So this is not something that we've had before. That's why we have zeros in the 21-22 year. It's not that we didn't receive those override funds and didn't spend those override funds, but they were incorporated into the general fund, Fund 10, in the past. And so breaking them out separately is what we want to do going forward. So starting that this year, 22-23, and then really projecting it well going forward next year for 23-24.
So in the past budget, when we're approving our budgets, we see that in a pie chart, but this is different because you are actually incorporating it into the line.
I'm isolating it out of that pie chart into its own fund, so it has that even greater level of visibility.
More transparency.
And more transparency.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The 1 to 2% efficiency gain, you said it's about 1.5%. That's, let's just call it process improvements. The hard cash that Ron was referring to, does that mean that the expenditures for 2023, 2024 that are at $52,130,210 should really be up 1.5% because we've found efficiencies?
No, I would definitely say it differently than that. The efficiencies basically change the nature of the spend in the budget. How much of that spend, of that $52 million, is related to a volume component, meaning how many staff do we have, and how much of that is related to a rate component, meaning what do we pay that staff. And so those efficiencies are basically taking money from that volume side and being able to apply it into the rate side. The total number stays the same. It's just the nature of the spend and how is it being identified and then projected out.
But ultimately, that reduction is out of the total expenditures.
It's a reclassification of the expenditure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Also on this page, you will see the increase that I mentioned in terms of the capital projects. So here is the $2 million budget that I mentioned for the 22-23 number. Here is the $3 million number that we're projecting for the 23-24. Many of these other funds still have a lot of detail work to be done beneath the surface, and but these are the high level starting points for that work. So let me show you if I can go on.
Any comments or questions up to this point? Please.
Okay, so there's a section here about School Finance Act revenue, which we've largely talked about already. But probably the thing to highlight and remember on this is that of this increase in School Finance Act revenue, a lot of that does come from the increase on the local share that we will be receiving through the increase of property values. The state share also increases, but of the 8.8%, this is the original, so let me go to the revised, kind of the final version of the 11% change in total program revenue. You can see that it's a 9% change in state share and a 14% change in local share. And so that what we have to always remember is that education funding is a local responsibility. Local funds are applied to it first, and then the state share balances the equation. It always starts with the local component. So the local component goes up, then the state component can react accordingly to get to that final targeted number of the School Finance Act, which is, again, is the measure of funding equity across all 178 districts in the state. Not all 178 districts in the state are receiving the type of assessed value growth that we're seeing here. It's about an average of 23% of assessed value growth year over year across the state, and we fit right on that average at 23%. So that means there are some that's growing more, and there are some that are growing much less in assessed value. So all of that equation, it changes that state share, and that state share fluctuates by district to get to that final equitable result. And so a district like ours, relatively speaking, would receive less of increase of state share, while a district who is having very little to no growth in assessed value, and therefore little to no growth in local share, would receive a greater percentage of state share, because that's what was necessary to balance their equation. Everyone's equation, in the end, needs to be balanced.
I'm going to gamble that I know what Mr. Schwartz is going to ask.
Give it a try.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I've asked plenty.
Actually, I was going to comment. So a mill levy override, though, does not fit into that equation.
Correct. This is School Finance Act revenue, what we call the program mill component. And so that's why I had started to mention it on that first page, how School Finance Act is one piece of the taxation, but it's not locally generated, not necessarily, it's locally generated, I should say that. It is locally generated. It's not locally determined.
Right, right. In other
Yes.
words, the state doesn't change their backfill because a school district does or does not have a mill levy override.
Correct.
And I owe Mr. Schwartz coffee because I was incorrect.
No cream, please. The elephant entering the room is 2024 property tax bills.
Mm-hmm.
And most people sitting here likely own property somewhere in the state of Colorado. And it's likely if they do, they've seen increases anywhere from mid-30s to high 60 or 70% on a one-year basis. So the natural question is, does this massive increase impact funds going to the schools? And if the formulary you explained is continued through this, I believe the answer is no, but the local share just is higher. Am I understanding that correctly? And you may not have had a chance to analyze this yet, but does this have any impact, positive, negative, or neutral?
So, yes, so the change in assessed values that happens, again, all over the state. And as I mentioned before, it's 23% is the average school district change in assessed value. And we happen to be at 23%, right on that average. It does have an impact at the School Finance Act, first on the macro level, meaning the total state pool, right? So the $10,000 number of total per pupil revenue as it affects us is part of that macro equation. And so the way the state would do this is figure out, okay, well, how do the big numbers come together? How much of the total School Finance Act bill is in state share or comes from local share? So for instance, if I look at the data for next year, before the budget stabilization factor, the total program is going to be about $9 billion, $9.2 billion. And the local share of that will be about $3.8 billion across the state. So again, as that local share increases, it's increasing first at all that local level, but it is aggregated to these total numbers and then balanced against what the state budget can afford for state share, and that becomes then what is the total School Finance Act revenue, which becomes that target for PPR across the state. But again, each district's individual answer will have some variety to that. So the answer is yes and no. Yes, it does impact total PPR. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily the one-to-one correlation because there is that greater equation that it's happening at the same time. Did I answer that or not?
I just want to see if I can paraphrase if I understood it.
Okay.
At the end of the day, if one is a property owner in District 38 and one pays the average, which is 23%, and I think you might.
The increase went up 23%.
The increase. Does more money go to the school district directly because we're paying to the county?
Yes, the money
That's
the
the
money
question
that
the citizens have.
The money that's paid for property taxes never leaves the county. Sometimes people say, "Oh, it goes to Denver first and comes back." No, it never goes to Denver.
Right.
It stays in the county. It collected by the county treasurer and then remitted to the school district directly. The state just knows what that number is and uses that number in its equation. So what you'll see here again on these numbers, I think what's interesting to see is that this year we had $17.6 million projection of local tax revenue, again, only from the program mill, meaning not override, not bond,
right.
And that's going to $20. So that increase, a 14% increase, the dollars collected. All of those dollars will stay here, and our total dollar increase is going up by 11%. When it's going up only by 11%, and the local property is going up by 14, that means there's a slight erosion in the state share on a percentage basis. You see, it's still up $3.7 million. It's not like it went down. It just didn't go up as
we're
much.
funding more of the bucket.
Yes, more of that.
money.
More of that is coming from the local share. Right. It's still. I'll say this in air quotes. I'm not trying to offend. It's still only 31% of the total bill is being generated locally.
Right.
66%.
69 cents on the dollar
is still coming from the state share.
Right. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions before I move on? I think there's probably just one other thing I'd want to draw your attention to. In the staff compensation program, as we've talked about the final pay schedules, which we'll then hopefully are considering for adoption in the next item, which I previewed for you at the work session. And this was due to some last minute changes in the School Finance Act revenue, which increased. We went from $9,800 per student up to $10,000 per student. And that was we were able to translate that directly into changes in the compensation program to get up to an average across the district change of 12% in compensation, separated by each of these employee segments above here. And then here are the individual pay schedules that support all of that math. Again, what we've been doing here this week is actually issuing contracts and notices of assignment based on consensus from our last meeting, that we could go ahead and do that using these schedules. So people are receiving those based on this tabular information that derives that. For licensed staff is in these first few pages. And then we have our hourly paid staff here in my best effort to put as much on one page as possible. And they're a little bit out of order, I'm afraid, but.
Back up to 33. I just have a quick question.
33.
On your annotation, you have the 3920 in the upper left-hand corner, the add to cells.
Yes. Okay.
I don't recall seeing that before, but are you adding that to every cell?
So that's the difference between the 22-23 and the 23-24 schedule.
Okay.
Okay. So the logistics of how the schedule is built hasn't changed. That's something we've talked to the SEC that we want to consider, meaning what is the difference between one number to the next number, and what is the rationale for that difference? So instead, what we've done this time is just take every single cell and added 3920 to it.
Okay. Because it was already built, you can just elevate the whole.
Yes.
Okay.
I know that's provided some confusion, so I want to keep saying. I so appreciate you asking that question, because I want to keep saying that, because some folks have said, "Oh, it's this number plus the 3,900." Well, that number already started at 38,330. So going to 42 plus is the difference with that 3920.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you highlighting it.
And the percentages.
And the percentage of that number is that 10.2% on teacher base pay.
And that's an average across the table.
No, that's the base cell, what we call base pay, that 1-1 position.
That you used as your foundational number.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oops.
Mr. Ridgway, as you've been going through these, have you gotten any feedback, positive, negative, indifferent, on this table from individuals outside of, staff outside of the Staff Collaboration Committee?
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback and what do you want to say, appreciation, gratitude for the size of this change, because it is something that in the end helps us just to a small degree narrow the gap that we have with other districts. It certainly doesn't close the gap, but when I hear that other districts are making changes that are in the 9% to 10% average across the district range, and ours is at that 12%. That's again going beyond the norm, trying to make take some intentional action and some intentional decision and direction to push beyond that. And so people have noticed that and have expressed a lot, I should say, of gratitude and appreciation for it.
And that's in addition to the other actions like the retention or longevity or loyalty bonuses.
Right.
And of significant importance, the compensation where you can bring your years of experience over and get credit for it here. That's a huge detractor from coming to work here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So fixing that is significant.
So I know that there's a lot of meat to this, and we're required to process through this. We recognize what our priority is, and there's 76 pages, and so this does deserve more time. But is there because of time, is there anything else that is a highlight that you want us to absorb before we spend the next month on our own time absorbing even more before we make this vote in June?
You know, there's a schedule here, which we talked about. We wanted to be able to share at some point, and this is talking about these efficiency gains and specifically what has been generated by schools. And unfortunately, the number here doesn't show as well as I would like it to, but it's $850,000 of efficiency gains that was generated at the school level, redeployed right back into pay schedules, which of that 12% average across the district change, we can swing right back and say 2% of that 12% change was because of those efficiencies. And so that is again what we want to do to push beyond the norm, push beyond that 10% growth in revenue to get to 12% change in compensation. There's still math that has to balance out for that, and that is the pursuit of, and recognition of those efficiency gains. And so that is a schedule here that I don't think you've seen before, along with other items that are coming alongside for the total change in terms of the overall compensation, changes to compensation for the general fund. And some the other information is stuff you've seen before, so I don't want to go through that. And I know we want to move ahead. There's the health benefit changes. I want to just show you a format that I put in for the other, what I call the other funds. And so this is not a format that you've seen before, either from myself or anyone else. And what this is just taking for these other funds, in this case being our property and liability insurance fund, showing you a historical trend prior to our last completed full year actual of data, then what is our current fiscal year, and what is our projected year for next year. So for each of these funds, what I try and do is kind of craft it to what is the significant style of the activity that's happening there. Here's a good one with Fund 21 in terms of food service, and this is a good example of something that I need to do more work on, but we have revenue being generated at the local level, meaning from what people in the past have been paying. Students have been paying for the lunches, and so there'll definitely be readjustment to this as it all shifts to state-based revenue next year. But how we're spending that in pay and in supplies for the nutrition program. In the activity program, then I shift to showing the revenue by location rather than by local source, because it's all local source. So that type of perspective doesn't have any utility for us. So it's better utility to know where is it happening. When you get down to the transportation program, this is an interesting one because we can see that in this year's budget, $1.8 million of transportation funding was still coming from the general fund. Customer payments are about I would say a quarter, it's more like a sixth of the total revenue. The state funding is about a third of the total revenue, and then the other half is really being made up still by the general fund. As we get to the bond redemption fund, we see that it's property tax collections that service the interest and principal payments for that. So each of these pages, again, you haven't seen these yet, so I just wanted to draw your attention to them, that they're there, and that I've tried to make some intention in terms of what the information is that I'm showing on each of those.
So just a thought suggestion for the team for tomorrow night. Brett has it here in magenta on the bottom right. It's page 6674 is a fee for service transportation. It might be valuable to have that handy tomorrow. Anybody that dives into this, the first question they're going to probably ask is, we have $750,000, it looks like,
right,
left, and then we're going to use it all next year, right?
And so that there's definitely something to be. This is part of the conversation we want to have, I would say, on June 2nd. In terms of the ending fund balance activity, and circle back to some conversations we've had earlier in the year in terms of helping our aged fleet.
Understood, but given that there's
I'm projecting
a citizen meeting tomorrow, it would be advisable to be able to speak to that.
We can certainly reference it tomorrow. I'll just leave it at that right now, because it's less of a financial discussion. There's other factors that have really brought us to this point. So,
okay. Fair.
But it's good background, good context.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, team, this is a lot to digest, and it's a lot of really good comprehensive information. We are required. When are you required to turn this into the state? Is it June 30th?
We don't actually turn it into the state. We validate with the state that we passed a budget by June 30th
Okay.
of the year.
And we're still exercising that flexibility. Mm. Is that the right term?
Flexibility for what?
Our budget. There's a term.
Yeah, we call it
amended budget. But if I can pretty succinctly, what you have in front of you is the official draft proposed budget that can be slightly modified between now and June 26th for formal approval. Mm-hmm. What we are also required to do by law is to make sure that we publish this so that there's ample community notice. And as part of the June 26th meeting, you will have a public hearing that will precede public comment as a portion of that agenda, specific to the purpose of receiving commentary about the budget. So that doesn't mean people have to wait until June 26th to provide commentary. It just means that's the formal mechanism that we have. So one of the things that we will be sharing with the community is that here is our draft proposed budget as presented to you all this evening. Here are different ways that you can provide that input as a quick reminder, because June 26th will end up being a virtual meeting. Right. That will have to accommodate public comment in a manner that allows folks to let us know if they're choosing to provide that. There will be a mechanism for folks to be able to sign up ahead of time so that we can admit them into the virtual space and make sure that they have that opportunity in that formal space. Again, we can also take digital public comment, I know this board is always open to emails. We're open to emails. So really this presentation helps open that lane up for any feedback to be collected between now and June 26th, all the way up to that official meeting where that vote will be taken. Is there anything else you would mention to that specific process?
No, that's good. Thank you.
And please share any questions that you have for Mr. Ridgway, and he can cover those at our next public meeting as well. And I just want to remind folks that we're doing our June 26th meeting Zoom because of unforeseen circumstances. That's the date that we were able to get a board quorum together to make sure that we have a meeting. And so the virtual option was the option we went with. Any other thoughts or questions before we move along? We've got a big, hefty lot to cover still today. So any final thoughts or comments?
Yes, thank you and the teams for what you've achieved on behalf of our staff and our students.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Ridgway.
You're welcome.
You can stay right in that seat.
I'm not going anywhere.
Now we move on to item number 5. To consider, approve an updated 2023-2024 certified and classified staff pay schedules.
So as I mentioned, this is the schedules that I showed you in that previous presentation, and we talked about these at the work session earlier this month, and so we just wanted to have the formal adoption of these.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the updated certified and classified staff salary and wage schedules as presented.
I'll second.
Any comments, questions?
My only comment is we need Mr. Schwartz. I apologize.
I was going to do a break in a minute. Mr. Clausen, do you have any thoughts or comments?
I don't. I'm ready to vote.
Ms. Phillips?
Nope, I'm ready to vote as well.
Mr. Norris, you ready to vote? Is there anything, I'm ready to vote as well, but I can stall for a few moments, but is there anything
Well,
that we need to
I
see
do have
there?
a question for Mr. Ridgway.
Mm-hmm.
How do you open your documents so that you can magnify? You have, I know this is a technicality, but since we have a moment, when I open them in Safari, I'm not able to, are you opening them in a different
Well,
format?
we're on Windows here and using Google Chrome, and so I assume, I don't know, we have these
Oh, I can
big
open
buttons
it in
up
Google
here.
Chrome. I just don't have
Yeah.
it in Safari, so
Okay.
I'm not ready for that yet. Thank you.
So you also have the hamburger menu over here, so you can go back and forth between. You can scroll and find a particular
Yeah,
page.
no, I don't have
and
that
click to that.
menu, so I'll look into it now that
Okay.
Mr. Schwartz is back, so I don't
All
want
right.
to delay us any
No
further.
more delays necessary.
Thank you so much for the work you've done with this, and thank you also, I want to do a shout out to our staff collaboration committee that's put a lot of energy and effort and given up a lot of their evenings to come together and work through this and really dive deeper into what does this look like for D38 and with our limited resources and our limited funding. So this was good work. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And there's more work to be done. This is a
Absolutely.
great first step.
Absolutely, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to work together on that.
Thanks.
Ms. Wood?
Mr. Clausen.
Aye.
Mr. Norris.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz.
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch.
Aye. All right. Let's do our last one, number 6, and then if the board would be pleased to take a 5-minute recess, but we need to move along. But let's finish this up with you, Mr. Ridgway.
Thank you. I'm sorry for always taking a lot of time.
Well, the budget does take time,
Budget
so
does take
it was
time.
expected.
And so I'll just on the FP&A, we have the normal things that we go to are the graphical presentations, which are here. So this is a activity statement year to date about revenue and expenses, shows our trend of fund balance. Now we're in this time of year where our fund balance is recovering from our normal low point in February as the property tax collections have been coming in from March, April. So we are on that track to restore our fund balance. But again, the reason the fund balance is the way it is to manage cash flow throughout the course of the year. And we have the different patterns that our revenue comes in versus how our expenses go out. The other, and so there's that. But the thing I wanted to maybe draw your attention to is what we alluded to a little bit in the prior item, was talking about the MLO operations fund and how that is now being identified and being populated with information for how for the revenue that is coming in there and the expenses that are going out of there. Right now, I'm only showing it to you in this summary basis on this particular slide. I will eventually get to a unique reporting page just for that particular fund. But even until then, there are some indications of the spend here when you go into these other pages. I know this is probably for accountants only in terms of enjoying it. But what we have here is, again, the revenue that's being collected in Fund 14 under this column, and you can see how some of that is starting to be paid through gross pay and the benefit categories here. Okay, so I just wanted to just give you that little indication of how every month we're making additional progress and additional steps towards demonstrating exactly how that money is being collected and then distributed. And if you're ready to cry uncle, I will cease and desist.
Any questions or thoughts or comments on these items? I do have one.
Okay.
When you mentioned that you would be creating and going to more in depth on that particular fund, I think that's a great idea for all of our special funds. Some of it may not just have anything in it except for one item, but I like that idea of separating that out into detail, and that adds another layer of transparency.
Will do.
Mr. Schwartz? Ms. Phillips? Mr. Norris? Mr. Clausen?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
All right, then we are moving along. You are free. Would the board like to take a 5-minute or 2 to 5 minute recess, or do we want to just plug away? I could take a consensus.
I would suggest we keep moving forward.
You want to keep moving forward? Okay, then let's push on to number 7, first reading to revisions to policy. We have several policies on here. And this is a first reading. It does not require a vote. This is our opportunity to ask questions. So this, we would like to invite Mr. Rick Frampton up, along with Ms. Stacy Baker. We'll be looking at ADF, JLJ, and JKA, and their associated regulations.
I'd like to invite Kristen Thiessen up too. She was helped implement this, so.
Sure. Did we get a table or a chair for Miss? There you go.
Thank you for having us. As you can see, you have the draft policy for ADF up there. So in terms of what a local school wellness policy is, just a reminder, it's a written document that guides a local educational agency's or school district's efforts to establish a school environment that promotes students' health, well-being, and ability to learn. So there's provisions on that final rule that we have to have certain content in it, specific goals for nutrition promotion, education, physical activity, and other school-based activities that promote student wellness. There's standards and nutrition guidelines for all foods and beverages sold to students, standards for food and beverages provided but not sold to students, and policies for food and beverage marketing. The final rule of the school wellness policy, which is implemented by the USDA, is that we have to do a triennial assessment. And so this final rule requires state agencies to assess compliance with the wellness policy requirements as a part of the general areas of the administrative review every 3 years. So USDA enforces this for us to do the triennial assessment. The Colorado Department of Education, they are the ones that oversee the process. So we are due. The last time this policy was revised was back in 2017. So that's just some background on it. And also to clarify, this is for schools operating the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program. Our 3 secondaries, excuse me, only operate special milk. So this policy is just for the elementary schools.
No, you do not need to read it.
Okay. We had no idea.
It's a fair question.
Board, any comments?
Sure, I'll comment because I was involved with, I think, well, numerous meetings, and you have both put in a lot of effort, as has the entire committee. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And also, I just want you to speak that it was last revised in 2017, and then I believe in one of the meetings you mentioned that due to COVID, we are catching up. Is that correct?
Yes. So this would have been due in April of 2020, and there wasn't a whole lot of policy revisions going on at that time. So CDE and USDA has extended and given us waivers, and the final deadline now is June 30th of this year that we have to have it approved and implemented.
And just for my fellow board members, because I was involved regularly, I can speak to the thoroughness of the approach that you took. Can you just outline that very generally for us, Kristen?
Yeah, so what we did was we used, Colorado Department of Education recommends that we use a WellSat, which is an assessment tool to look at our current policy, and it includes all the federal and state requirements in that, the wording in that assessment tool. And so we assessed our current policy, and then we assessed our current practice. And so what we did was everything that we are currently doing in our district that was not in the policy, we just added the wording to it. And I wish I could have a before and after for you to see the easy changes, but we reorganized the entire wellness policy just to make it align with that WellSat tool and to make it more clear the exact sections that we're discussing in the policy.
So I think this is just an illustration of sort of the perfect nexus of taking what D38 was doing and doing well, making sure that that's incorporated and articulated well in our policy, and then also taking the state standards which are required, as I understand it, and making sure that our policy is very, very rigorous so that we are in compliance. And it's just an excellent example for this board to look at in terms of addressing policy in a very comprehensive way, and so that when we are approached with or asked to approve a policy, that we know very well that it's been very well constructed. So thank you for all your efforts.
Any other thoughts or questions? This is the second time you did this presentation. I've seen this twice now. I saw this at speaking of our PCAC, I've seen this at the PCAC, and I've seen this at our board work session. And I appreciate that you guys, when we came to you with some ideas or thoughts, that you thought those through and incorporated that. And so I appreciate that you were mindful of the different processes and the different thoughts that went into this. It was a thoughtful process. Mr. Clausen, any thoughts?
No, thank you.
Again, this will be voted on at our next board meeting. So that's the wellness one. There's there's some other ones. Mr. Frampton, would you like to speak to those as well? Thank you also for the work you've done.
So the other part of this that we had to update in going through was the physical activity policy JLJ. And we followed the same basic process that we did for the wellness, and Kristen can expand on that a little bit more too.
Yes, when I did the WellSat assessment of our wellness policy as a whole, there were a lot of physical activity components of that that we did not address. And so in order to not make our wellness policy a duplicate of our physical education policy, we decided to put all the updated verbiage in the JLJ. And then the wellness policy just references the JLJ. And again, we just added stuff that our district is already implementing currently.
And when I said the work and the input, I meant both of these two. Again, any thoughts, comments, questions? Thank you so much, by the way. And we'll see you again virtually on the 26th, and we will be voting on this. Mr. Frampton, you also have some as well, sir.
I do.
He's got glasses too.
Any thoughts, comments, or concerns, board, on JKA, JKR? While Mr. Frampton is bringing that up.
Yes. The only reason we're needing to do a quick first reading in May is we're required to have this policy updated by July 1st. So we need to take a look at this month and vote for it next month.
And this is a legislative change.
That's correct. And the single most important factor, there's some reporting changes to it, but the single most important factor that's going to change our practice is the law has changed defining physical intervention from 5 minutes to 1 minute, and that will require us to engage in some reporting, both to families and to the state, for any holds that go beyond 1 minute. Previously, it was 5 minutes. And then if you go to the JKAR, the accompanying regulation, you'll see some clarity in definitions and practices there. Do you have any questions about that?
Mr. Clausen, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Norris?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Phillips?
No.
Mr. Schwartz?
No, thank you.
Well, that was fast.
That was easy.
Um,
I think I get the next one too.
okay, great.
I believe the next one is the first reading of.
JLCDC.
Yep, and I'm struggling. I am not opening up my windows here, so I need to. There we go.
Medically necessary treatment in school settings.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. This is a new policy that we're proposing, and it too has a requirement of being in place by July 1st due to a law change. We currently engage in the practice of allowing healthcare specialists to come into our schools when it's appropriate. The legislature passed law last year that's requiring us to allow for us to continue with these services. And we are putting policy before you for the first time to help define what that means and define the process. I don't believe that the process is going to change significantly from what we've already been doing. Really, the spirit of this law is to work in collaboration with our families to ensure our students are receiving the medically necessary services that they're needing in the school setting. We've been doing that primarily historically. We've been doing that with private duty nurses where a child has some unique medical needs that requires additional nursing services, and the parents are providing that, and we have invited them into our schools. The medically related services can extend beyond that, but historically that's been the primary need for our students.
And for background, when this came about, this legislation came about last year, this was a full discussion. There was a lot of very strong testimony for and against this one. How does this affect D38?
Well, like I said, we've already engaged with families and worked collaboratively with families when they believe that their child has medically necessary services, specifically around nursing, and we have allowed that in our schools. So I don't see that changing from a 30,000-foot view. What I think the policy is going to do is it's going to direct us on more process and procedures, so we are more consistent about what processes we put in place, how the IEP meetings need to address these services. So I think it'll standardize much of what we've already been doing. If we have families who want to expand this beyond the nursing services, that will be new to us, and we'll have to work alongside those families to ensure we're meeting the needs of the kids.
Ms. Phillips, did you have a comment?
Nope.
Okay. The goal was to make sure that we're that we are making sure that all of our students are taken care of in the buildings throughout the state. But it does add a layer of more policy and more procedure. So
It is one additional policy, that is correct.
okay, if there's no comments or questions, Mr. Clausen?
No, thank you.
Then we will move along because this was again a first reading. We will be voting on number 9, which is our next one, which is a revision to policy AKF. Thank you so much, Mr. Frampton.
Yeah, good evening.
And Ms. Wetstein, we will invite you to come up. And this was in regards to approving the revisions to policy IKF, which is the graduation requirements, and this was specific to our foreign languages.
May I make a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion to approve revisions to policy IKF graduation requirements as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Questions, comments, discussion? No? Ms. Wood, would you take the vote, please?
Mr. Clausen?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
I'm an aye. All right, moving on to number 10. Ms. Wetstein, you get to stay in that seat.
Okay, thank you for allowing me time to discuss 2 types of resources. One, which we will call academic curriculum, and then the second, which is resources for elementary school counselors. And I have broken the presentation up into 2 different slide decks to clarify the difference between these 2 proposals. So I will begin with our curriculum review process, and for this evening's presentation, I would ask that we consider this a first reading. We did preliminarily open up a review process for community feedback, which I'll speak to, but as we will continue this meeting as the first reading for these proposals, part of my presentation will be an extended opportunity to invite feedback. So first, this curriculum revision cycle applies to our academic curriculum, which would be all of the content areas in which we teach the Colorado academic standards. And as you can see, we want to ensure that we have current resources available to our students, and so we have a cycle of bringing teachers together to review materials, and then also taking a look at our Colorado standards as those are also revised on a regular basis to ensure that, again, our students have materials that are relevant, age appropriate, and up to date. The process we follow when we are taking a look at new curriculum is we bring teacher teams together to review the most recent adopted standards, and then teachers also consider their current resources in that process and identify any potential areas of need. Teachers then review potential new resources for recommendation for purchase, and then we invite the public to review and comment on all newly proposed resources. Ultimately, the board has the authority to approve or deny proposed purchases of new curriculum resources. The curriculum that we're presenting this evening, while I'll go back for a moment and remind you that we did look at kindergarten through 5th grade social studies resources, kindergarten through 8th grade science resources, and then several math courses at the high school level. However, when we took a look at our current resources, for the most part, we felt that they still are meeting our needs, with the exception of 4th and 5th grade science and 4th grade social studies, which in Colorado requires us teaching Colorado history. This proposal is just to update our current textbook with a newer edition. And then finally, Algebra 2. I will also share that the 4th grade social studies textbook that we provided for review to the public is a prototype. So we are making recommendations based on some of the feedback to the publisher, and we have already been notified that they are getting recommendations from other districts across Colorado as well.
Was there a summary of the feedback from the community?
Yes, it's all in board docs.
I read the individual comments, but I didn't see a
summary.
In other words, in general, was the community in
I would-
favor,
I don't-
neutral, opposed?
You know what? I'd like to provide a more extensive summary once we open it for further review. Because we had limited review, it may be difficult to find themes.
Yeah. In the spirit of not creating a make-work project, is there a simple format we can use as we do this all the time so that it's easy for you and your team to work with, and we're comfortable absorbing the same format all the time? Sort of like the policy
Yes.
format, even though it's become an eye chart because of the quantity, but would you, the team concur to make this
We can certainly.
easy to fill out and easy to absorb?
Can you expand?
Yeah, a simple data table that says we had this many respondents, with this many pro, this many neutral, this many con, and here's an example of some noteworthy comments.
And I think you'll see that, in your next presentation, is that correct?
Yes, I
It's just that
actually
there
had
were so
included
few
something
reviews.
similar, and we've
Okay,
since
great.
decided to provide an additional opportunity for feedback, and so I will compile that for the next presentation.
Thanks. I just didn't, I read all the handwritten comments, I just didn't see any summary.
So, as I spoke about, we did have an initial feedback window, which was available for community to come in and review these curriculum resources between May 3rd and May 12th. However, to allow ample time for community input, we will extend the viewing window through June 8th by appointment. And a communication will go out first thing tomorrow morning with directions on how to request an appointment to view those resources. As I mentioned, all of the initial feedback is available for review in board docs, and I want to emphasize that while we are extending this opportunity, all of our curriculum and resources are available for parents to review at any time by requesting to the school principal to take a look at any curriculum resources. We have also had the idea that at the beginning of this school year, we would like to put all curriculum resources on display as we welcome families back to school for back to school nights and open houses, and so that we can just provide ample opportunities for folks to see the resources that we're using with students. And I'll pause on this portion before we move on to the counselor resources.
I did have a question on the Colorado Story one. When you stated that the publisher is already changing that, and when I reviewed it, I saw a typo in there as well, and there was a couple pages that were when I read the reviews, I could share in some of those questions. Can we get a written letter or statement from the publisher?
We can ask. We do have an updated couple of pages that have been changed since we received the prototype, and we've included those new pages as part of the community review once we got them. We can certainly ask about what other additional changes they might be expecting.
I was just asking because if we're voting on a resource or a curriculum, to make sure that we're voting on the one that's going to be in the hands of our district.
Yes, we do have the changes in hand that are already being proposed by the publisher.
Okay. Up to this point, any questions or comments? Mr. Clausen?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, different from academic curriculum, you will remember that about this time last year, we were talking about the need for an approval process for character education resources across the district. And so in response, in September, we brought forward responsive classroom resources, capturing kids' hearts, and sources of strength for approval by the board. These resources are used widely across our schools. And then I also asked the board for some time to provide elementary counselors the opportunity to look at the resources they were using and bring forward a formal proposal by spring of this year. For some context, I've included some descriptions of the responsibilities that our elementary school counselors have. They are to teach proactive, developmentally appropriate lessons for all students. This typically happens on a rotation basis, so students are not getting these lessons on a daily basis, but more usually once or twice a month. Counselors are going into a classroom with the teacher present and teaching proactive lessons, which we'll talk about what some of those topics are here in just a moment. They also provide, a majority of their work is providing individual and small group counseling sessions based on specific student needs. And of course, that is in coordination with students' families in that case. They serve as a source of information to students and families for community resources, for needs beyond what the school can provide. And they support students through the coordination of the school's multi-tiered system of supports. And that is the system we use when an individual student may be struggling for academic reasons or may need some additional supports to help manage their behaviors or their experience in school. This proposal is aligned with the board's character education policy, which states that while parents are the primary and most important moral educators of their children, the school and community should reinforce parental efforts, and specifically by supporting the teaching of honesty, respect, responsibility, courtesy, respect for and compliance with the law, integrity, respect for parents, home, and community, the dignity and necessity of strong work ethic, and conflict resolution skills. And so our elementary counselors, in reviewing available resources, have proposed two resources that they feel best align with supporting these characteristics. As was mentioned earlier this evening, we also do have a policy, IMBB, which provides parents the opportunity to opt their children out of school activities that may be against personal beliefs and teachings. The two resources that we are asking the board to consider for approval are Fly 5, which is published by Responsive Classroom, already approved for use in classrooms in our elementary schools. And then Second Step, which is published by Committee for Children. And a note here is that currently Second Step has been being used at Bear Creek Elementary School only. A brief overview of each of these programs. Again, Fly 5 is aligned with Responsive Classroom, which is an approach we use across our elementary schools to support a safe, healthy, and welcoming school environment. The resources are available to support kindergarten through 6th grade, and the materials focus on supporting self-regulation, communication, and problem-solving skills. Second Step has 4 units that are aligned to support kindergarten through 5th grade, and these units are the same units from kindergarten through 5th grade, but are focused on developmentally appropriateness depending on the age of the students taught. So at the beginning of the year, there are resources to support students with growth mindset and goal setting. Unit 2 focuses on emotion management, Unit 3 focuses on empathy and kindness, and Unit 4 focuses on problem-solving skills.
Can you, or do you know how long Bear Creek Elementary School has been using this?
No, but I can certainly find that out. I know at least this year, and I don't believe it has been much longer than that, but I will verify.
So this is just a renewal or an update?
It would be a
of their
renewal,
resources.
correct.
Would it be district-wide or just Bear Creek?
So we are asking for your consideration to approve both of these resources so that schools would have the option to select from either two.
And do they have to pick one?
If they were going to use a resource, we would want to ensure that it was one that was approved by the board.
So that begets my next question, just to attempt to understand this. Some of the things that were listed on slide number 4, which is a review of character education policy, IHAK, seems to me to be things that would happen in the daily classroom versus from a counselor. And so my question is, in order to leverage these resources, does the counselor do something on a consistent iterative basis with student X that might require this assistance, or is it more of an intervention or a single or dual event?
Yes. So there is a rotation of school counselors providing supplemental lessons to whole classrooms, and oftentimes, and for anyone who has taken a look at the resources, it might be a lesson about how becoming good friends, how do we respect each other. One lesson I reviewed was about how do we help ourselves stay focused when we might become distracted. And so these are opportunities for students to discuss strategies around all of those, these skills here and the problem-solving skills that will help them be successful academically. And then the majority of their time is also spent working individually with students, as you suggested, Mr. Schwartz, that may need some type of intervention to help them be more successful in school. In addition, they may be working with small groups of students who are experiencing some kind of situation in their lives, potentially experiencing grief or a deployed parent. Those are the kinds of small group interventions that counselors would facilitate, again, in coordination with families.
And just to clarify, these are character education resources as opposed to a curriculum that the counselor is implementing.
Yes, and I should also explain that these are not intended to be taught cover to cover. They are resources that counselors can utilize to pull from to help them have ideas on how to facilitate discussions with students, whether it be individual or small group.
So it's designed to be tools in their toolkit.
Absolutely correct. These are also not student-facing materials for the most part.
Mr. Norris, do you have any questions?
Ron, are you done with your questioning? Yeah, a couple of questions. These resources, what are the counselors currently using?
Bear Creek is currently using Second Step. Bear Creek also had a grade level or two, I believe it was kindergarten and first grade, that was utilizing the Fly 5 resource, and the rest of the schools have been using teacher, counselor created resources. So individually created lesson plans and such.
Maybe from the internet?
I
Pulling information
can't
from
say
somewhere.
that for sure, but I do know that we have counselors who have developed their own lesson plans over many years of experience.
Okay, so Fly 5 and Second Step, are those hard copies or are they online copies only?
They are, Fly 5 would be a purchase of a hard copy. We don't have access to that until we would make that purchase. We have the online access currently, and I believe that Second Step is an online resource that a counselor would have a subscription to access.
Okay, slide 5. What's the relationship between policy IMB-B and policy IMB? Is it like a mother-child relationship? Is it a build upon? IMB is controversial issue policy. So what's the relationship between IMB and IMBB? So maybe we don't need to spend much time on that. Let me ask you this: these two particular resources are prefaced by two different policies, two different protection policies. So what my concern is, if we implement, if the board decides to implement these resources, you're asking us to approve material that could potentially violate our other policies. And if they violate those policies, what recourse do we have? So the counselors say the board approved these books and I really didn't violate them, or I don't know that I'm saying that.
Can I break that apart just a little bit, just to help aid the I think the initial question you asked was a real good starting point, in that the relationship from IMB, which is specifically teaching about controversial issues and use of controversial materials, is a broad policy topic which starts from a place of, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but controversial issues are defined as those problems, subjects, or questions about which there are significant differences of opinion and discussions of which generally create strong feelings among people. Now, I'm not trying to assert that there may not be an alternative point of view, but generally speaking, when you are looking at the resources that are currently in front of you for consideration, I would offer this up. What specific aspect of that resource, and I mean almost down to cite the page and cite the lesson, is actually that controversial? Because I don't know that it's actually being presented that way. I think what we're hearing is a lot of, from the side that would say that we shouldn't be doing anything, there's a lot of allusions or allegations of we just should not be tackling this topic in school. But I would redirect, and this is why, part of the reason why we're elongating this review process, is to really encourage folks to say what specifically about this resource, which is teaching lessons that are in alignment to character education. So getting to the second part of your question, I actually would argue that by using these resources, we are exercising what the board is asking from a character education resource standpoint. Otherwise, we're just kind of making stuff up as we go. So this would correspond to what we have already approved. as well as offer some supplemental material that is counselor facilitated in the course of, it's not a day-by-day lesson approach, but it's kind of either once every couple of weeks or once a month, as well as those smaller group and more targeted lessons that we're talking about. So if I'm hearing your question correctly, I don't believe what we're proposing is necessarily violating anything. It's just to say, we understand that you can make an argument that anything we teach may be controversial. If that's the case, you can exempt your child from that required instruction, which is what's specifically stated in the IMBB. But again, reiterating that these resources are in alignment to character education policy, that's really what you have in front of you, is the rationale for the use and approval of these resources, or approval and use, is to ensure that we are consistent with what the intent of that character education policy suggests. Does that help address most of
most of it? So
Okay.
I think let me think about how I'm going to ask this question. If a counselor violates policy IMB,
based on what though?
Based on the material we're reviewing here, Fly 5 and second step.
Okay, go ahead.
Would we hold the counselor available, or would the counselor say the board approved this book in whole, not in part, that we're not accepting this material on conditions?
I really think as you're asking that, I'm reading the controversial issue policy, and I don't believe we're putting our counselors in a position where they are intentionally teaching something controversial. Again, the spirit of that policy is, and I think if you look at typically where we see exemptions to required instruction would be in health education when it comes to sex education. Certain lessons that may be taught as part of history, or potentially some themes in a particular higher level class. I mean, we're really not talking a lot about elementary instruction. Matter of fact, in my whole experience, I've never seen any elementary instructional topic be challenged as a controversial issue. So I think it's really understanding the intent of that policy is, as we grow in developmental stages, certain topics may be part of the curriculum or part of instruction, and that's where that controversial issue policy would typically lie. But we would also honor an exemption from instruction. Essentially, it's an opt-out type of an approach. So I think we just have to be clear on that, because I really would challenge us to say, are we putting our counselors in a position where they're teaching something that really is that controversial, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So you're confident that?
Yeah, and that I think is the core of the issue. That's where I think when we're hearing that we may not like this resource, I would really want to understand specifically what part of teaching a lesson about kindness or problem solving or how to get along with people or taking care of somebody who's maybe feeling left out. I mean, that's the general topic we're talking about. We're not getting into a whole lot of difficult topics per se. It's just fundamental, it's age appropriate, and I think you'll see the progression of that resource when you really dig into it, aligning to a first grader or a third grader, or even, all the way up to fifth grade. I think it's fifth grade. There are sixth grade lessons. That's a little bit different of a angle to it, but again, I would argue that there really isn't the controversial nature of those topics as currently presented in those resources from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Amber, can you speak to the communication that goes out for parents who might want to opt out?
Yes, actually, as part of this process, once we decide what resources we will use, we have committed to working with school counselors to better communicate what topics are going to be discussed on a monthly basis and clarifying the opt-out process at the school level. So typically through a school newsletter would be an example of that.
And we have families in our district that completely opt out of any contact with a school counselor. And that would fall under this policy.
Let me make sure I understand that. Go ahead.
So if we have a school counselor that's teaching kindness or teaching any of these subjects
Sure.
that are in a school, we have some families that have decided, this is my job at home. I don't want any contact with my child. I want to be the one that's doing this, and the child, there's another activity.
That's correct. I mean, we are honoring that wish.
I'm just saying we do have that happen, and that's an example. I was using that as an illustration or an example of where that applies to this.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Okay, so again, we will send out communication first thing in the morning, inviting families to come and review these resources in addition to the academic resources that I presented on earlier. And then we will update with a summary of that feedback, board docs, so that you can see all of that feedback prior to our next board meeting. What additional questions might you have?
Mr. Schwartz? Ms. Phillips? Mr. Norse? Mr. Clausen, do you have any feedback or thoughts?
No questions, thank you.
I do appreciate that you're extending that. I've looked at this, and I appreciate the opportunity to dive deeper into it. I value the feedback from all aspects of our community, and the families that are in our elementary schools that are close to this, their feedback is important. And there's some feedback in here when I read it, I couldn't find it, so I want the opportunity to find out what the feedback is talking about, because I could not find it in the resource. So I want to learn more and continue to dive deeper, so I do appreciate this opportunity to look into it. And per board policy, we do a first and second reading with all of our curriculum.
Can I add one more thing? And I'm really sorry, because I just want to be really thorough and complete. When I alluded to exemptions from health education and specifically sex education, there is actually a separate policy for just that topic alone. That's IHM and IHAM and IHAM-R. So I clumped those two together in my response, and I just want to be clear that the controversial topics policy, IMB and IMBB, kind of are in a category unto themselves. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen on occasion, but it's actually pretty rare, and it's very restricted to themes that have, I guess maybe the way to describe it is almost like adult content. And we're very measured in how we follow our curriculum in those specific spaces. I'd be hard pressed to find an example off the top of my head, but I'm happy to dig further into that so that we can really spell that out so that you understand how often are we getting those exemptions. It's not very often at all. So I just wanted to call that out to be super specific and clear.
Sure. Well, and to be clear and specific, we don't actually teach sex education to our K-5 students.
5th grade.
We do growth and development.
Age-appropriate lessons that are part of state standards beginning in 5th grade. And there's a progression and a sequence that follows from that.
And those are the ones where we as parents get our notifications.
Correct.
Say, yep.
And those are very, yep.
Any of us in this district remembers getting those notifications that.
That's correct. Thank you for letting me, and I apologize, I didn't mean to confuse that topic, but that was the first one that came into my head.
Any other thoughts, concerns, feelings, discussion? Again, if there's anything you would like to add, be sure to please reach out to Ms. Wetstein between here and our June 26th meeting when we will vote on this. And with that, thank you so much. And let's move on to number 11. We are almost done. What you'll see in front of you is our meeting dates, our proposed meeting dates. There's coming up within the next school year. and just want to make sure that we are all on the same page of, there's often times that we think of meeting dates and then something happens and we have to change that meeting date. But there are some conflicts in what would be typically the meeting dates that we would have followed that rhythm. So we want to look at those, the regular meeting dates and work session. And that is on your draft Board of Education meeting dates. And we as a board can decide if Mondays and Tuesday mornings work for us. We can decide if a Thursday is better. We have that opportunity to decide for next year what the consensus of the board is of what dates and times work and days of the week work best for meetings. And this is also, I want to bring again, reiterate that our June 26th meeting is via Zoom. And to anybody that wants to give public comment at that meeting, we have to follow that public comment process that we did similar to COVID.
Correct.
And we will send that out to remind folks.
Well in advance.
Okay. So, Dr. Summers, do you have anything to add to this?
Just a couple of mentions, pardon me. We were, as we looked at the draft dates and their development, we were still basing the design off of a every third Monday cadence for the regular meeting in most months, recognizing that there are some months that may have some variation. Those are called out by the stars. We were, excuse me, we were not completely sure about, did we want to do a work session on August 1st or August 8th? So we left that open. We left that as a TBD, assuming that we're going to continue with a Tuesday morning cadence. The other month that we're just kind of zooming in on from the standpoint of recognizing the election that will happen on November 8th will conflict with a date of, I believe is November 8th is a Tuesday, correct? Yes. Excuse me, November 7th, I apologize. November 7th is currently Tuesday. That is election day. So we were not sure if you all still wanted to have a work session on that day, considering what that day represents. And then, of course, we're just trying to stay somewhat flexible in the best way to approach those November meeting dates. So I think recognizing that you can approve whatever you decide to whenever you decide, but giving yourselves a little bit of that flexibility. The other thing that you certainly could do is approve dates for the first half of the year, and then leave the second half of the year open, depending on, obviously, whatever happens in the board election and how that process will flow. So those are just a couple of mentions that I wanted to call out as far as the draft goes.
So to clarify, we will formally approve these dates?
Well, you can choose to do that tonight, or you can pause and wait until the next meeting. But yeah, you would need to approve at least the beginning of the school year dates. We'd want to get those on the calendar before things end in June.
So if I could, I would advocate for approving the first half of the year up through December and having tentative dates for 2024. That just being that we're all professionals, and I know that as springtime approaches each year, it's been difficult for me to work around various commitments I have professionally. So I would advocate for that or request that from my fellow board members, possibly. With regard to the election date, I would suggest we not meet on November 7th, given that we have 4 board seats up for election. And I would also suggest we meet August 8th rather than August 1st, given that that's just right on the heels of July and some of us may be out of town.
So if I could reiterate, August 8th seems like it might be the better first work session date. Do not have a work session in November and only approve the first part of the proposed dates.
So would we not have a work session at all, or would we just move it to the next following Tuesday and push? Were you proposing no work session?
I think I am, yes.
Okay.
So the,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
would say if the administration is fine with that.
We are fine with that. I think we have to stay somewhat flexible in November, even knowing that the timing of whatever the certification of the votes demonstrates, there's a 10-day window after that certification where the new board has to be seated. So it really, there's not typically a lot of pressing business as we're rounding into November per se. So I think we could stay flexible. You could certainly choose to assign a meeting date at a later time, but also give the potential for whatever that new cadence would look like coming in after the election results and after that 10-day window. There will need to be at least a board meeting in order to certify that election result and set a new board.
So I would suggest that that board meeting be on the 13th, given the 20th is the week of Thanksgiving, and the 27th would be beyond the 10-day window.
Ideally, yes. The only challenge to that is it's a Monday, and we may not get the results until like Thursday or Friday because it wouldn't be on Thanksgiving. That's the only rub there.
so
And that Friday may be a federal holiday, if I'm seeing this right.
In November 24th.
No.
Is that the date you're
I'm
referring
sorry,
to?
can you clarify, is there,
November 10th.
so we need to wait up to 10 days for the election to be certified?
Following the official notice from the clerk, there is a 10-day window in which we have to officially certify that vote by a board vote and then seat a new board.
But do we have an idea of the time window between election day and the possible certification?
I think that's where it's in prior years, it typically is later in the week of Thanksgiving when we're off, correct?
Our county clerk and recorder tries really hard to get results to us prior to Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Knowing that school districts are trying to schedule this meeting and handle.
Okay, so with that understanding, then I would propose we have the meeting on the 27th.
I think we can shoot for that for sure. Yes.
and that would still be feasibly be within that 10-day window.
It would. So if I can recap again, August 8th would be our work session date for the beginning of the school year. We would target the November regular meeting for November 27th, and we would postpone any work session not scheduled on November 7th. If we don't need one, we don't need one in November.
What typically comes up during that time? Do we have, it seems like there's something that comes up closer. Is that in January? When do we have to have our audit?
Audit isn't officially due until end of January.
Okay.
So we have time there. Honestly, there would not be pressing business. The only thing that might be a little bit pressing is any policy revision or approval that we need to put in front of you.
Well,
And
legislation.
just to add to your list, Dr. Summers, and for Ms. Woods' accounting, I'd like to know what the other board members, if you are all right approving through December the dates, and then having a tentative schedule for January through June that we would approve at a later date in the fall.
I would second that.
I'm fine either way.
Yeah. Mr. Norris, does that work?
Yeah, I'm good.
Mr.
But,
Clausen? Oh, go ahead. My apologies.
I'm missing the 10-day point between Election Day, the 7th, and November 27th.
It's 10 days.
It will be 10 days following the certification. So yeah, if I stated that weird, it's because it won't be probably until the week of the 20th that we're actually getting the certification. And then it's 10 days from that subsequent point on.
Mr. Clausen, do you have any input?
You know, anything after the election, I'll defer to you guys.
So we just need to make sure you're there for August 8th, August 21st, September 18th. We don't, and September 5th, October 3rd, October 23rd, and then November 27th.
And then,
Yeah, potentially the only conflicts I might have is based on District 38 girls volleyball. So once that schedule comes out, I'll double check it with the calendar.
And then, Ms. Upchurch, I do think it's still safe to keep December 5th and 11th as scheduled.
Yep.
Because with a new board, that would likely be times that, I mean, we can, again, still modify them, but I think for the purpose of approving the first half of the year, it's probably wise to do that.
100%. I was just running the numbers by Mr. Clausen.
Oh, sure.
then I will make a motion, or I will entertain a motion for the upcoming dates as stated of August 8th, work session dates of August 8th, September 5th, October 3rd, December 5th, regular meetings dates of August 21st, September 18th, October 23rd, November 27th, and December 11th, and then tentative dates of January 9th, January 22nd, February 6th, February 26th, March 5th, March 18th, April 2nd, April 15th, May 7th, May 20th, June 4th, and June 17th.
Can I ask that somebody make the appropriate modifications to the master document and send it back out, please? Thank you.
Ms. Wood's all over it.
There a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Ms. Woods, when you're done typing those dates in, would you please do a roll call?
Mr. Clausen?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
Aye. And with that, we move on to our last item, which is item C12, consent agenda. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts for consent agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
I had a question.
Okay, that's fine.
Was this the part of the consent agenda that had the consultant to assist us with achieving our goals for the strategic plan? Was
Yes.
this in that component?
That is under number 5, Huron Studer Education Services.
Okay. I just lost the web page is why I don't see it. Would it be undisruptive if we were able to have a deeper discussion about that? Just because I had some questions on it. It's a great, right thing to do. I just had some thoughts and questions that I thought were worth going over. I know it's a bit late tonight.
I'm ready.
Could we?
I can answer anything you have.
So I wasn't able to review it yet. I'd like a little time to review it. And I can ping you one-on-one too, just to make sure I get it. But would it be undisruptive if we were able to approve this at our next meeting?
Well, considering part of our goal is to leverage this partnership as we're moving into our June 6th retreat, and I am on a timeline to provide a response prior to that. So I don't mean to be stubborn about it, but yes, it would be disruptive in this case.
Okay. Then I'll try to go very, very quickly.
Okay.
Okay. So what's the net expense to the district for the sum total of the contract?
For year 1, it is, thank you, $67,500.
Okay. And how many years is it?
Currently, the thinking is that it would be part of a multi-year, 3-year agreement. However, we're not signing a 3-year contract. We're approving the first year of 3 years with the ability to exit said contract at any point in time we decide to.
Okay. Are there any other costs or fees, travel, entertainment, administrative fees?
It's a 14% admin fee, so the quarterly installment would come to just shy of $20,000 over the course of next fiscal year, beginning in August, 4 payments, August, November,
So
February, May.
87,000.
I think it's more like 76.
Okay. So somewhere between $76,000 and $80,000. And then any travel or entertainment cost that's incremental?
It's all built into that 14% fee, so there is no incremental at this point in time.
And ultimately, if this is a successful engagement, what do we get?
I'm glad you asked. So our primary purpose is to really leverage the work of our strategic plan to support the execution of annual measurable goals, including a district, department, and school scorecard, which are going to align specifically to our strategic plan priorities, which will include 90-day action cycles, the administration of periodic stakeholder surveys to align our feedback from the community in an effort to ensure that the D38 experience is continuously improved upon. And it also integrates into our leadership development platform with a goal of advancing a great workplace culture and the ability to execute on all our priorities. So if I can borrow a statement from Ms. Upchurch, we've done a lot of good work on our why and our what, and we still have more work to do on our how. And this partnership would facilitate a real deep-seated commitment and execution plan to speak to our how. So it's, understandably a commitment on our part. It is on theirs. This is a national firm that has multiple partnerships across the nation with a track record of success. So the ROI on our experience is every priority that we have in front of us. We will have specific measurables that make it sticky and make it something that outlives, to be frank, all of us that are sitting here. This is not about a individual or person-dependent exercise. It's about how we bake everything that we're working on into the culture of our system for the long term.
So it becomes part of the DNA.
That is the terminology that I think is exemplified in Hardwiring Excellence, which is one of the texts that I was able to provide you a copy with tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
So all that's what I was hoping to hear. And then the last question I have is on the what. So when one has a what and one's trying to do something that takes a lot of time and energy,
yep,
then we move from current state to desired state.
Absolutely.
Desired state gets us to the point where all these things are part of the DNA of what we do. So is that defined well enough to where an entity like this can do their work?
I think if you have a chance, when you have a chance to read the very detailed summary of the contract as it's set forth, you'll see that written out very robustly and with an opportunity to be very customized to our needs and our direction.
Okay. Thank you. It sounds like you've done wonderful diligence here. Last question has it been outlined how to do this work over this course of time? What percentage of consultant resources are needed and what percentage of district resources?
So that's really our next step. Once this contract is, or upon its being solidified, that work plan would be something that we co-develop and demonstrate in a manner that's consistent with timeline, deliverables, roles and responsibilities, et cetera. So it truly is an authentic partnership in that effort.
Okay. Just obviously that can end up in an area where it becomes weighted heavy on one side or the other, and I just want to make sure from a resource allocation standpoint that it's something that the team is fully aware of and able to absorb.
Yes, I think we're fully prepared for that on our end, and they are able to deliver on our expectations, and accountability would go both ways there.
Okay, thank you for indulging me.
Absolutely. Thanks for the questions.
Those are good questions.
I'm done.
Okay. We do have a school district in the Pikes Peak region that has used Studer D49.
That's correct.
So any questions or further comments? Mr. Clausen, any further questions or comments?
Nope. Thank you.
Anything else on the consent agenda that needs to be pulled or discussed? Okay, well, seeing none, Ms. Woods?
Mr. Clausen?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
Aye. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, is there any discussion for future meeting dates or any other business for the good of the order? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.